Hey guys, imagine waking up before dawn, freezing rain drumming on bamboo roofs, your breath steaming as you stumble barefoot across a courtyard that is somehow colder than the Arctic, only to discover the sun has not yet decided to rise, and you're expected to train until it does. Sound pleasant? Well, keep holding that thought. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. If you've ever wondered why most of us modern folks wouldn't last a single week, and certainly not a year, in a samurai training school in Feudal Japan, you're in for a treat. Picture yourself thrust into a world where your cell phone is a blunt wooden sword, your morning coffee is cold river water filtered through your teeth, and your idea of a break is polishing armor until your knuckles bleed. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to drag you by the collar into this historical nightmare. The glorious absurdities, the relentless discipline, and the kind of pain that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. Ready? Let the madness begin. You roll out of your futon at precisely 3 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because according to the head sensei, thermal inertia of the human body must be overcome before dawn. Translation: it's so cold your limbs will feel like dead fish if you don't move before the sun warms the air. Your first task: 20 laps around the training yard, mud up to your ankles, frost creeping into your socks, while chanting a mantra about the impermanence of suffering. Try doing that before your first sip of caffeine. Go on, I dare you. Shivering, you finally tumble back to the dojo entrance, where a dozen fellow trainees glare at you through the pre-dawn mist. Everyone's wearing identical gray robes that are supposed to unify the group in spirit, but mostly just unify you in misery. There's the butcher's son from Echigo, who has muscles on his muscles, cracking jokes in an accent so thick you need subtitles. There's the samurai, adopted from a minor lord, who tells you in hushed tones about his aristocratic lineage between sword drills, like knowing your great-great-grandpappy fought in some legendary battle somehow helps when you're exhausted. And then there's you, gasping like a dying carp, desperately calculating whether life would have been easier as a peasant farmer. Actually, no, it probably wouldn't. The bell strikes 4:15 a.m. sharp, because everything here revolves around bells. And the first lesson begins. Seated meditation. Sounds peaceful, right? Wrong. Imagine sitting cross-legged on polished wood, back straight as an arrow, hands folded in a mudra, eyes closed so you avoid the freezing breeze. But the sensei suddenly yells at you for a stray toe tremor. Your mind wanders because your body betrays you. He sneers as you try not to shiver. He insists you meditate until your legs go numb enough you lose all feeling, at which point you'll begin to glimpse true enlightenment, or at least cease asking, "Is this over yet?" After what feels like an eternity, he finally calls it, "Open your eyes." Only you've been so focused on not fainting that you haven't noticed the sun climbing above the horizon. Mist clears to reveal the courtyard littered with bodies in varying states of collapse, some hugging their knees, others sprawled like discarded mannequins. You'd think they were wounded, but no, it's just Tuesday. By 5 a.m., you're whisked off to the weapons training pavilion. Here, every apprentice must learn to wield the bakken, a wooden katana substitute, until your arms feel like they're about to snap off. The head swordsman swooshes by, correcting every last detail: the angle of your wrist, the trajectory of your cut, the way you retract your blade. You attempt a downward strike and hear the dull thunk as your bakken grazes the straw mat, only to be met with an ear-shattering roar. What is this? A racing turtle's chop? Faster, sharper, more spine. You swing again. You swing 100 more times. Eventually your shoulders scream mutiny. You can almost taste blood in your mouth, although you're not really sure if it's from an overstrained muscle or the fact that you scraped your lip on your folded ribbon belt. Either way, the sensei claps once, so loud it rattles your skull, and commands, "Enough for now." You stagger outside, praying for water. Water in a samurai training school is a test in humility. Forget fountains or taps. Your source is a communal wooden bucket filled from the well at dawn. By your turn, the water is lukewarm at best, muddied by floating bits of something indiscernible. You dunk your head, swallow half the bucket, then realize you're supposed to rinse your mouth out into a trough, meaning you'll ingest it again later. It's the circle of thirst. At 6:30 a.m., breakfast is served. A bowl of plain rice and fermented soybeans so pungent they could strip paint off a castle wall. No salt, no garnish, no reprieve. You're expected to gulp it down in silence, eyes lowered, spine straight. Any attempt at commentary, like, "Does anyone else smell doom?" is met with a sharp gaze and the suggestion that you might chew slower if you appreciated subtle flavors better. You chew rice. You chew regret. Fueled by the ghost of breakfast, you're then introduced to the art of ukemi, falling safely. Sounds useful, right? Except here, falling involves leaping off a 5-foot platform, twisting midair, and landing without complaint on gravel below. 1 or 2 trainees promptly register for immediate injury leave, only to be told injuries are merely the body's way of asking for more resilience. Translation: suck it up, buttercup. You watch as the brawny butcher's son splats onto the gravel, then flips up with a grin. You follow suit and face plant like an amateur juggler. Gravel slices your forearm. You don't get a band-aid. You get a taunting lecture on embracing your scars like the heroic fallen. By 8 a.m., you're having your first lesson in history. A venerable scholar recites the exploits of Minamoto no Yoritomo while you take notes on rice paper with a brush and ink. One slip, one blot, and the ink soaks through, leaving your work irredeemable. A true samurai pen trembles not, the scholar intones. You tremble anyway, ink-stained fingers trembling like autumn leaves. Your neighbor's paper is perfect, and he smirks when the scholar swoops over and praises him. You, on the other hand, are told to copy the entire scroll of The Tale of the Hike again, by sunset. Noon rolls around like a merciless judge. Lunch is ramen. Just kidding. Ramen didn't exist yet. Instead, it's more rice, a chunk of fish that looks like it's been tanning in the sun since last season, and miso so salty it burns your esophagus on the way down. You chew mechanically, eyes glazed. You alternate between dreaming of sandwiches and plotting a daring escape, perhaps dive into the moat and swim back to modernity. Afternoon brings the stealth lesson. Under cover of dense bamboo, you're taught to move silently, avoid twig snaps, and blend into shadows. The instructor demonstrates by gliding so quietly you swear he's part ninja. You advance, crouched, feet barely touching the ground, and then crack, a branch betrays you. The instructor stops mid-step, gives you a look that could curdle milk, and you realize that stealth, too, is about ego. Every snap is a reminder of your fumbling presence. You shuffle back, same path, hoping he'll forget the disturbance. But he notices, of course, and sends you to practice under oak trees until twilight. As the sun dips low, you gather for archery. A bow bigger than you is thrust into your hands, and you're expected to notch an arrow, draw your full weight, and release with deadly precision. Your first shot whizzes harmlessly into the sky, then lands unknown kilometers away, probably into someone's dinner. The archery master sighs, hefts your bow, and demonstrates a single shot that would fell a deer blindfolded. You pick up the bow again, arms trembling. "Remember," he murmurs, "control your breath." You try to control everything, breath, heartbeat, mind, but end up with a face full of string stings and an arrow that barely clears the fence. Night's lessons arrive once darkness blankets the courtyard. Candlelight flickers as you learn sumi, the art of ink painting, except here, the subject is your own feudal existence. The master instructs you to capture the spirit of a crane with one brushstroke. Your crane looks more like a drunken pterodactyl. The group bursts into laughter. You die a little inside. Finally, at fully dinner time, or supper, if you prefer feudal lingo, you sit on tatami mats around a long wooden table. The meal is a stew of dubious root vegetables and grains. You eat in silence again, occasionally stealing glances at the butcher's son, who seems to be thriving on this misery, cracking dark jokes about culinary torture. You respond with a weak smile, silently wishing for some human connection in this void of camaraderie. Exhausted, you prepare for evening drills at 8 p.m. Because discipline never sleeps, torches are lit. You practice kata, the ritual forms, until your muscles quiver and your mind threatens to wander back to 2025, where you could binge watch cat videos in bed instead of flailing with a balkan. The head sensei circles, stopping at you. He raises an eyebrow as he watches your blade wobble. Instead of words, he simply taps the balkan harder, causing you to drop it. The clang as it hits the stone floor echoes through the courtyard like a death knell. "Retreat," he commands without a hint of mercy. Retreat means crawling on hands and knees to the edge of the courtyard, then crawling back, over gravel, over dirt, until your palms bleed. You glance at the stars, wondering if they're judging you. The pain numbs your thoughts. At 10 p.m., you're finally dismissed. There's a single basin of freezing water near the latrine where you attempt a rushed cleanse of dirt, blood, and shame. You scrub until your skin reddens, hoping tomorrow you'll magically transform into a hardened warrior. Spoiler alert, you won't. You crawl back to your futon, every muscle whining, every joint plotting rebellion. As you lie down on the thin tatami, a single lantern flickers, casting long shadows like ghouls dancing on the walls. Your body aches, your spirit quakes, and you wonder, why do I do this? Because tomorrow, the bells will ring again at 3 a.m., and the cycle of pain and absurdity awaits. And somehow, some misguided part of you craves that very madness. Congratulations, you survived day 1. Tomorrow, we'll explore the even stranger rituals of samurai etiquette, the hilariously brutal cold water cut baths, and the horrifyingly zen art of sword sharpening on live coals. But for now, rest your weary bones, for your trial by fire has only just begun. The morning bell claws you awake again at 3 a.m., as promised, whether you like it or not. You fling aside your thin futon, convinced your spine has permanently molded to its form overnight. Your limbs feel like overcooked noodles, yet you shuffle into formation in the courtyard, already shivering despite the pre-dawn chill. Today's theme, samurai etiquette and the infamous cold water awakening bath. You close your eyes and pray, please let them skip the fancy bowing rituals, my knees can't take another twang. But no such mercy arrives. Instead, you're marched to a low wooden platform where mats and cushions lie in perfect symmetry. 3 senior samurai sit cross-legged, robes pristine, expressions carved from marble. They will observe as you practice the correct kneeling posture, seiza. Simple, right? Kneel with your legs folded perfectly underneath you, butt resting on heels, back straight like a sapling, hands resting evenly in your lap. You attempt it, but your feet go numb instantly. Your knees protest loudly. The senior samurai make not the slightest sound, but the aura of disapproval stings worse than any shouted rebuke. You wobble, your thighs burning. Finally, you collapse forward in an undignified heap, eliciting the faintest nod from the eldest, as if to say, good, you've discovered genuine suffering. Next, the art of bowing. Each trainee must master 4 distinct bows, the informal nod, the polite bow, the respectful bow, and the prostrate bow. They explain overtly that a misaligned bow is worse than no bow, as it betrays inner chaos. You swear your vertebrae flattened a millimeter under the weight of expectation. Standing before the eldest, you attempt a respectful bow. Your torso should form a perfect 45 degrees angle, but you lean too far and nearly faceplant. You scramble upright, cheeks aflame, while the samurai scribes notes on tiny scrolls. You suspect these annotations will follow you to your grave. Bow drills conclude with an exercise so cruel it must be a prank. All trainees must hold the prostrate bow, flat forehead on the floor, arms extended, until the senior samurai deem it sufficient. You count seconds in your head, 10, 20, 30. By 100 your arms feel like they've been run over by a cart, yet no words come. Your throat tightens. You wonder if you'll ever see sunrise with a functioning neck again. Exhausted from the etiquette marathon, you are then summoned to the awakening bath. You trudge to a stone-built ablution area where a wooden vat holds ice-cold water drawn from a mountain spring. The samurai philosophy asserts that true warriors must condition themselves to discomfort, forging mental steel by subjecting flesh to agony. You stand on the cold wood slats in just your loincloth, heart hammering as the lead instructor, a grizzled veteran with scars crisscrossing his face, commands you to step in. You audibly gasp as your calves hit the water, then your thighs, until the icy grip encases your waist. Breathing steadily is impossible. Every inhale feels like swallowing shards of glass. You lower yourself fully, chest submerged, until the water's lip threatens to flood your nostrils. 5 seconds in, you emerge, teeth chattering violently. You expect applause, or at least a nod of approval. Instead, you are told, again, twice more, without hesitation. You steel yourself for round 2, realizing any protest would earn you the ice tears, a punishment involving being doused from head to toe by pails of water at midnight. You repeat the plunge, round 2, then 3. Each time you swallow more of the bile in your throat, squinting through the tremors. Finally you crawl out, slipping on the wood boards like a newborn deer, and collapse face first into the straw mats. The veteran samurai squints down at you. Adapt or perish, a 6-word eulogy for yourself. Breakfast arrives, another bowl of rice and beans, this time with a side of charred miso paste offering a faint promise of umami. You eat mechanically, fingers still numb. Across the table, the butcher's son shovels his like a man possessed. You envy his capacity for survival, then remember he used to wrestle boars for sport. Your own boar fighting days consisted of choking on store-bought donuts in your living room. By 7 o'clock a.m., it's time for the next atrocity, sword sharpening on coals. You did hear mention of live coals. Artisans say fire tempering a blade yields the perfect hardness and flexibility. You stand in the forge pavilion, heat roaring like a trapped beast. Glowing embers at your feet radiate waves of scorched air. A master swordsmith presides, tapping the heated edge of a real katana against a whetstone. Sparks fly like fireflies in a nightmare. You're handed a second-rate blade, not your bakken, but a genuine steel practice sword, and told to rotate it steadily against the stone. The instruction, 3 passes at each angle, then cool in the ash before another round. Your first stroke garners a grunt from the smith, too slow. You speed up. The blade skitters across the stone, metal screeching in protest. You're told to apply the gentle strength of compassion, which you translate into pressing harder. The stone shaves silver flakes off the steel, but your blade chips. Oops, the smith's scowl could melt iron. He orders you to start over. 20 minutes of relentless rubbing. Sweat drips into your eyes, the coals behind you flicker ominously. When you finally finish, your arms shake so badly that your fellow trainees can't tell if you sharpened the sword or buttered a loaf of bread. The smith nods once, maybe in pity, and moves on. Next, you're ushered to the tea ceremony room, a serene space with sliding shoji, tatami floors, and a single calligraphy scroll proclaiming harmony. After the hellish forge, you expect respite, but this is Feudal Japan's version of psychological torture. The tea master, an ancestress of Zen herself, instructs you in the precise movements. Whisk the matcha, pour the water at 75 degrees C, which you must estimate by sound and steam. Rotate the bowl exactly 2 1/4 times, then present it with the correct bow. You fumble the whisking, creating frothy peaks like a disturbed volcano. You overpour, dribbling bitter tea on the tatami. You rotate wrong. The tea master's silence is deafening. When she finally speaks, it's to correct your posture again. You leave with a bowl of green sludge you nibble as penance. Lunchtime brings a modest feast: rice, pickled radish, wild greens. You chew thoughtfully, your mind drifting to sandwiches again, groaning at your own mental weakness. But you're back at stealth training by 1 o'clock p.m. This time in total darkness, each trainee is blindfolded and led into a maze of barrels and bamboo stacks. The goal, navigate to a bell and ring it without bumping into obstacles. Naturally, you collide with everything. Barrels topple, bamboo rattles like ghostly laughter, and your blindfold slips, clattering to the ground. When you find the bell, you ring it so inelegantly the clang echoes through the darkness like an alarm. The instructor turns on a lantern, every eye on you, and says, "You call that silent movement?" You mutter, "I call it trial by darkness," but it's not received as humor. At 3:30 p.m., it's time for horsemanship, or in your case, an abbreviated version. Balance practice on a wooden horse. You hoist yourself onto the rough-hewn structure, legs hugging the splintery sides, hands clutching crude leather straps. You must lean forward, back, left, right, replicating mid-gallop shifts. To simulate real conditions, the instructor slaps your heel with a whip handle if you wobble. Each slap stings like a wasp's kiss. By the time you dismount, hands are blistered, thighs are bruised, and your dignity is off grazing somewhere in the paddock. Dinner, more stew, stale rice cakes, and broth that tastes faintly of moss. Feels like a celebration compared to earlier meals. You sit cross-legged, slurping, surveying your comrades, bruised, bloodied, yet strangely triumphant. The butcher's son raises an eyebrow and whispers, "We're halfway to becoming legends or lunatics." You nod, thinking both might be true. As night deepens, you gather for the final challenge of day 2, philosophical debate. Under lantern light, the head sensei poses paradoxical questions. Can a sword be both sharp and dull? Is mercy the greatest strength or the deadliest weakness? Each trainee must answer without hesitation. You volunteer first, stumbling into a rambling monologue that sounds like you googled Zen quotes 15 minutes ago. The sensei listens impassively, then says, "Your answer lacks conviction." You speak with the tongue, not the heart. You attempt to clarify, but he waves you silent. Your neighbor, the adopted samurai, delivers a precise, scholarly response and is awarded a small ceramic cup, apparently a token of approval. You stare at your empty hands. Finally, at 10 p.m., you're dismissed, again. Your body protests loudly, each joint a creaky hinge. You limp back to your quarters, eager to collapse. Yet as you lie on the tatami, you feel a flicker of something unexpected, pride. Despite the absurd cruelty, you've survived 2 hellish sunrises and faced rituals that would break most spirits. Somewhere buried beneath the whining and the regret, a bit of warrior spark ignites. You drift into uneasy sleep, hearing the faint echo of tomorrow's bell already tolling in your dreams. Tomorrow promises the ultimate test. Night raid simulations under the full moon, torture resistance drills in the interrogation chamber, and a final showdown with the head swordsman himself. Will you emerge a hardened samurai, or merely a ragged husk longing for Wi-Fi? Only time and the incessant clang of steel will tell. The third dawn arrives like a hangover you can't cure. Your body signals mutiny at every waking breath. Shoulders refuse to raise, hips complain like an old gate hinge. But the bell tolls at 3 a.m. sharp, and somehow you stumble into line. The head sensei, face illuminated by torchlight, inspects each trainee with the critical eye of a hawk spotting a sickly sparrow. You catch his gaze and feel the weight of 1,000 swords pressing down on your soul. Today's trials, a full-scale night raid simulation, the interrogation chamber of psychological torment, and a one-on-one with the head swordsman to test your kenjutsu. Buckle your loincloth. Disaster awaits. First, you're herded into the shadow maze behind the main barracks. Torches burn low, casting dancing silhouettes across stacked crates and embankments. The objective: infiltrate, locate a hostage, actually a life-size straw dummy with a painted face, and escort it out without alerting the guard patrols. You slip on the mud, curse your lack of modern footwear, and press your back against a crate. Somewhere beyond, low voices grunt in feigned conversation. You dare not eavesdrop too obviously or risk detection. Your heart drums against your ribs like a war drum. You inch forward, knees clicking like mismatched puzzle pieces, grasping your balkan as if it were a lifeline. Suddenly a twig snaps. You freeze. 2 guards in dim lantern light sweep past, armor clanking. One twin to the butcher's son, one totally unfamiliar. They pause, sniff the air. Your mind races, stand tall and greet them with proper bow. Instead, you opt for the classic frozen statue impression. They move on, and you nearly crack a silent cheer, until the head sensei's booming voice echoes, too loud. Apparently the twig gave you away, because in his mind you shriek like a peasant woman spotting a fox. You're ordered back to the start. Round 2. This time the guards step on rubber leaves, because obviously they prepared for a trainee's second runs. You get caught again, and he coolly remarks, "Your presence is like a plague upon the night, undetectable yet unforgiving." Translation: you stink at stealth. Back again. By the 5th attempt, you manage to slither through the labyrinth without catastrophic noise. But you overshoot your target, tumble past the hostage to the perimeter fence, and wake every guard in a 5-mile radius. At least you get extra practice crawling under barbed wire, except the wire is wooden stakes bound together, which tear at your robes and flesh like angry wasps. You extract the straw dummy, drape it over your shoulder, and make a grand, if stumbling, exit. You're panting, ribs rasping, but the head sensei nods once, as if to say, "I see a glimmer of potential," or perhaps a comedic tragedy. You file back into formation, arms shaking, wondering if today's breakfast will include anything softer than rice. Breakfast, of course, is the same rice and fermented soybeans. But now there's a twist. The beans have been replaced by pickled bamboo shoots, the kind that could double as medieval torture devices. Variety is the spice of life. The cook chortles when you complain. You chew mechanically, visions of modern smoothies dancing in your head. Next up, the infamous interrogation chamber. Legend holds that even the fiercest samurai cannot maintain composure here. You're blindfolded and led into a stone room lit by a single flickering candle. The door slams shut and you hear the scuff of footsteps, more than you ever cared to know. A gravelly voice intones, Confess your weakness, warrior. Whisper the secrets of your heart. Silence hangs in the air like a noose. Then the real torment begins. You are asked an endless series of unnerving questions, each more psychologically bizarre than the last. Do you fear the sound of dripping water? Describe the taste of your blood. Can a warrior sleep with one eye open? The interrogator's voice is soothing, almost fatherly, as if coaxing a child to nap. But you can't lie convincingly. You blurt out everything, your childhood fears, your deepest regrets, that time you cried watching a puppy video. The interrogator nods after each admission, and you realize the goal isn't to extract information, but to see how much shame you can swallow. After what feels like hours, the door swings open. The head sensei stands there, expression inscrutable. A samurai must know himself first, he says. You stumble back into the corridor, head spinning with existential dread and maybe a bit of therapeutic release. By 8 a.m., rituals of mental endurance complete. It's time for a light session of kenjutsu against the head swordsman. He's a living legend, rumored to have never lost a duel, and to have single-handedly held off a dozen bandits. You approach the ring shaking like a leaf in a typhoon, wooden sword quivering. Your opponent stands across, stance perfect, eyes cold as steel. He nods curtly. Begin. You lunge. He sidesteps and taps your shoulder. A gentle gesture, then a flick of his bulkin catches your wrist. Your sword clatters out of reach. Before you can blink, his blade rests at your throat. You raise your other hand in surrender. This counts as an honorable pass, he says. But the sensei's lips twitch in something suspiciously like amusement. You bow deeply, cheeks burning, and retreat, feet dragging. Next time, the head swordsman murmurs so only you hear. Try to remember you're alive before you fight. You file out, reflecting on whether your heart had ever truly beaten in sync with your sword. Probably not. Lunch is more ritualized. Rice, a thin fish cake, seaweed broth. You barely taste it, mentally preparing for the afternoon's night raid finale. Between bites, you overhear the butcher's son joking about opening a sushi bar in the afterlife. You laugh weakly, imagining ordering sashimi from above. At 1 p.m., break time, except there are no breaks. You're given a ceramic bowl and told to make field rations. Rice cooked in a hollowed gourd, foraged plants, dried fish shavings. You must prepare it without fire, solar cooking through glass, except of course no glass allowed. You pile ashes on the rice, coat it in leaves, then wait while the sun crosses the sky. After an hour of squinting at a dull ember, you admit defeat. The head cook samples your charcoal rice and mutters, palatable in an age of famine. You drop your head and shovel the ashen grains anyway. Hunger truly conquers dignity. By 2:30 p.m., preparations for the night raid begin. Every trainee is issued a short sword, smoke bombs made from clay and herbs, and a pouch of grit for blinding enemy go-betweeners. The head sensei addresses the group. Tonight, you'll breach the eastern gates, rescue the hostage, and return without detection. Failure means starting tomorrow at the beginning. You glance at your comrades, some faces pale, others resolute. The butcher's son grins like he's about to audition for a battle opera. You wonder if your face looks equally ridiculous or terrified. As dusk approaches, you don your black training robes, mask sliding over your nose. The courtyard hushes. You move in formation, footfalls silent. Torches line the walls, guards patrol in intervals. You slip through shadows, avoid beams of light, until you collide with a training dummy armed with a spear. You stagger back, nearly dropping the potted herbs you plan to fling. Your heart thunders. Behind you, a guard's voice. Oi! You hurl the clay bomb in a panic. It explodes in a plume of smoke, right between you and the real guard. He coughs, waves arms, beam of his lamp sweeps past and misses you by inches. You exhale, white mist billowing from your mask. The mission's a comedy of errors, yet somehow you press on. You reach the eastern gate, a tall wooden structure with iron reinforcements. 2 guards stand firm. The plan, distraction plus silent takedown. You whisper the signal. A trainee slips behind, grabs one guard's ankles while you strike the other with the dull side of your sword. They collapse in a heap. You stuff rags and pillows, gag them, drag them out of sight. Your leg cramp from crouching. You ignore it. The butcher's son flashes you a thumbs up, blood trickling from his knuckles. You're too busy questioning your life choices to respond. Inside the courtyard beyond, you locate the straw hostage again and this time you shudder when you realize it represents an actual person left hostage if you fail. You sling it over your shoulder and literally sprint back the way you came, hearts pumping, stomach twisting. Smoke from your bombs hangs low. You catch glimpses of startled guards coughing, raising alarms, but somehow you slip through each checkpoint. Your lungs burn like embers. Back at your training ground's rear gate, you heave yourself and the dummy through a small wicket. The head sensei stands waiting, arms crossed. You bow, dropping to one knee. He approaches, runs a hand over the straw's painted face, and nods once. "You have succeeded," he intones, voice grim. "But remember, victory is only the absence of defeat." You stand, chest heaving, fear still buzzing in your ears. Other trainees join you, grouping around the sensei for debrief. The smell of sweat and smoke fills the air, a strange perfume of triumph and survival. Dinner that night feels almost celebratory. A hearty stew with root vegetables, grilled fish, and rice cakes. Conversation hums quietly, rare camaraderie forming among those who survived. The butcher's son toasts with a chipped wooden cup. To the fools who made it through. Glasses clink. You tip your head back and swallow stew like it's ambrosia. For a moment, you taste not only salt, but relief, pride, and the faintest spark of belonging. But before you can savor this fleeting warmth, the head sensei stands, clearing his throat. Tonight's final lesson, the art of the unseen wound. He motions to a low table where a single bowl of lukewarm water sits. "Wash your hands," he says. You kneel and dunk your arms. The water is scented with camphor and something acrid, meant to remind you that even minor wounds can fester unseen. As you lift your arms, the head surgeon samurai appears, brandishing a scalpel. He demonstrates a superficial cut along his forearm, then seals it with a cauterizing oil. "A samurai must treat every cut as mortal until proven otherwise," he lectures. You grit your teeth, volunteering first. The scalpel pinpricks your skin, sharp, precise, and you barely flinch, more ashamed to show weakness than to feel pain. He pours oil. You hiss as it burns. Around you, others go through the same brutal baptism. Finally, the final dismissal. You shave sleep-starved hours off your mind and body. But tonight, there's no crawl back to quarters. Instead, you're sent to meditate in the garden under the full moon, contemplating unseen wounds, physical, mental, emotional. The garden's stone lanterns cast long shadows across moss and stone. You sink to your knees, hands pressed together, eyelids heavy. The cool night air whispers through bamboo. Despite every fiber of your being screaming for bed, you sit in seiza until the moon arcs halfway across the sky, until knees scream rebellion, until even your thoughts ache. In that space between exhaustion and delirium, you glimpse something flickering in the darkness, a shard of resolve, a glimmer of steel. At last you rise, legs unsteady. The garden gate creaks as you slip back into the barracks, guided by a single lantern. You collapse onto your futon, body broken but spirit oddly buoyed. Day 3 is done and you're still, somehow, standing. Tomorrow will bring the final showdown, a mock battle against your peers, the ultimate test of strength, strategy, and sanity. Will you stand victorious, or will you become another cautionary tale whispered in shadowed corners? As you drift into a fitful sleep, you remember the words engraved on the dojo gate. Pain is the crucible of warriors. You drift off smiling grimly, ready, or at least resigned, to find out just how far you can be crucified. The final dawn assaults you at 2:45 a.m., instead of the merciful 3 a.m. you've come to expect. Someone has decided that anticipation of pain is an art form in itself. You stifle a groan, peel your limbs off the tatami, and pad to the courtyard. The air carries a bitter chill, as if the world itself regrets what's about to happen. Today's ultimate trial, the grand mock battle, Kaizen Gaiko, a fight for honor, strategy, and the last shreds of your dignity. No breakfast is served. Instead, you're handed a small piece of hardtack and a cup of watered-down rice tea. The logic, hunger sharpens the mind, and a hollow stomach teaches you the true meaning of yearning. You nibble the cardboard biscuit, cheeks caveman achy from lack of real food, and sip the lukewarm tea that tastes like regret and wet straw. At 4 a.m., the trainees assemble in the main hall. Torches flicker along the pillars, casting long, quaking shadows. The head sensei stands before a wooden board outlining the battle map. 2 teams, red and blue, each with captains, scouts, archers, and foot soldiers. Your heart flutters as you recognize the butcher's son has been appointed a scout. Fast, agile, and apparently immune to pain. You're named a foot soldier and directed to protect the supply cache, a stack of wooden barrels representing water, rice, black powder, simulated, and straw dolls, hostages. If your cache falls, your team loses. The opposing team lines up across the courtyard. You glimpse the aristocratic adopted samurai's reserved smile. He's leading the charge on the enemy flank. The head swordsman and the grizzled veteran flank the sensei, arms folded, watching your every twitch. You realize this isn't just a game. It's the culmination of everything you've endured. Flesh-deep cold water plunges, shin-vibrating sword drills, god-forsaken meditation, and the utter humiliation of etiquette practice. It's do or die for your pride. Begin! The sensei's voice cracks like a whip. The 2 sides surge forward. You plant your feet in mud and grit your teeth. Scouts scuttle away like startled rats. Scouts from the enemy doing the same. Arrows whistle overhead, wooden tipped, but they still sting if they find flesh. The butcher's son streaks past you, ducking behind a stone lantern, leaving you clutching your balkan and wondering why you agreed to this. Your orders: hold the cache at all costs. You crouch behind a stack of barrels, heart thrumming. Every trainee in sight is someone you've suffered alongside. Some you've resented, some you've admired. Now they're charging at you with the same fervor they used to swing wooden swords at practice. You resolve to stand your ground, envisioning a mental fortress of stoic resolve. The first wave of enemies, 4 trainees, descends on your flank, swinging sticks and chanting battle cries. You brace yourself and swing. You block the first strike awkwardly, twisting your wrist and feeling that familiar pop of protest. You grit your teeth and redirect the second blow, then counterstrike at midsection. Your balkan meets flesh or robe, and you feel that electric jolt of contact. A grunt. You stagger as another trainee hurls a smoke bomb, filling the area with choking dust. You cough, wave at your eyes, and try to see through the haze. Suddenly a booted foot comes crashing into your ribs. You roll aside, tasting sand and doubt. You slam into a barrel, which topples, sending a dull thud through your spine. Peering through the smoke, you see the butcher's son engage with 2 archers from the enemy team, deflecting arrows with frantic blocks and pummeling them into retreat. You find renewed courage watching him. You shout a ragged war cry and charge into the fray. Your adversary is the trainee who excelled at stealth lessons, a lanky kid whose silent maneuvers once drove you mad. He lunges and you parry, senses acutely honed by weeks of non-stop drills. You strike, he stumbles, you press forward, adrenaline blasting. It feels like the clash of steel, even though it's wood. You taste victory for a split second, then another trainee tackles you from behind. You hit the ground, see stars, but manage to hook your legs around his, twisting and rolling away. By 5:15 a.m., the smoke bombs have cleared. The courtyard is a war zone of overturned barrels, scattered straw hostage dolls, and panting combatants. You're soaked in sweat, streaked with mud, and crackling with pain. Every muscle screams in protest, yet you stand, slamming your balkan on a barrel to rally your team. Voices echo, some cheering, some cursing. The head swordsman watches impassively, as if evaluating a painting of chaos. Defense team rally at the west wall. You bellow, surprising yourself. A handful of teammates drag the remaining barrels into a semicircle fortification. You position yourself at the center, looking every bit like the desperate heart of a doomed army. Enemy archers have repositioned on the roof of the pavilion, raining plastic arrows down. You raise a hand to shield your eyes, then realize, this is it. This is where you prove you're not just a modern wimp in wooden robes. You grab a nearby wooden bucket and swing it like a shield as an arrow thuds into it, bouncing off. You laugh, a sound rough as gravel, half in triumph, half in insanity. The butcher's son drops from the pavilion roof with a twirling, graceless flip, sword extended, scattering archers like bowling pins. He offers you a fist bump, then remembers you have a bucket, and smacks you upside the head with it. You reel, spit out a groan, but at least you're not knocked out. The tide turns, the enemy falters under your makeshift defense. You surge forward with unexpected ferocity, chasing them toward the eastern gates. You feel the primal roar of battle in your blood, fierce, foolish, and exhilarating. In that chaos, centuries of samurai training flash before your eyes. The relentless drills, the nights spent shivering, the screams of every muscle fiber begging for mercy. Now you wield that suffering like a weapon. At 6 a.m., the sensei bell tolls. Time, he calls. The courtyard falls still. Combatants freeze in mid-swing. Dust drifts through shafts of pale dawn light. The captains tally the fallen barrels. Your team lost one. The enemy lost 3. You've won. A ripple of incredulous joy washes over you as you realize you did it. You, the tongue-chewing, toe-trembling modern interloper, held your ground and emerged victorious. The head sensei strides forward, staff in hand. He surveys the scene. Broken barrels, abandoned hostages, the bodies of defeated trainees. Not lifeless, but panting, bruised, arguably enriched by near death. He stops before you, eyes narrowing. You fought with spirit, he intones. You turned suffering into strength, but this is only the beginning. You bow deeply, chest heaving. Your legs threaten collapse, but you straighten, resolved to stand tall. The scratches on your arms sting like a reminder. Pain is part of the contract. You will honor it. A brief celebration follows. Rice, fish, and sweet potatoes roasted in embers. You eat ravenously, savoring every smoky flavor. Camaraderie blooms among your fellow survivors. Laughter, teasing, shared swagger. For a fleeting moment, you're not a sadist's plaything. You're one of them, a warrior forged in absurdity and agony. But of course, there's no rest. By 8 a.m., the final lesson begins. Reflection. You're led to the dojo's great hall, where a scroll hangs, blank except for the kanji, Jian Dao, Nichido, seeing the way. Each trainee is handed a brush and asked to write the single word that best describes their journey. No embellishments, just truth. You stare at the blank paper, brush poised. So many words flash through your mind. Pain, suffering, torment, chaos, absurdity. But then you think, transformation. You dip the brush, the bristles quiver, and you write beyond Shing, Henkei, meaning transformation. The ink bleeds into the fibers, each stroke heavy with memory. The bone-chilling baths, the relentless sword drills, the night raids, the hidden wounds. One by one, the trainees finish and bow. You look at the scrolls, Yong-Chi, Yuki, courage, Chi-Ju, Jikyu, endurance, Ban, Kizuna, bonds, Ameng, Akumu, nightmare. The butcher's son's word is rebirth, Bisheng, Kasei. The adopted samurai's is legacy, Yi-chan, Isan. You glance at yours. Transformation, the core of every struggle you've endured. The head sensei steps forward, eyes misting in the candlelight. He pronounces a short benediction, then nods the scroll to the wall. Let this be a testament, he says, voice softer than you've ever heard, that the crucible of pain forges the steel of spirit. You bow deeply. The dojo erupts in applause, not mockery, but sincere respect. For a moment, you allow yourself to feel proud, even heroic, though your body aches like a cart full of bricks. At 9 a.m., you're finally dismissed. There's no crawl to the latrine basin, no forced meditation under a full moon. Just the quiet aftermath of combat, the smell of wood smoke, and the soft hiss of bamboo leaves in the morning breeze. You step into the courtyard, take a deep breath of feudal air, and close your eyes. You feel the scars of battle on your forearms, your ribs, your mind, and you feel them as badges of honor. As you prepare to depart the training school, you pause at the weathered gate. Above it, the inscription, Wushu Dao, Bushido, the way of the warrior. You trace the characters with your eyes, remembering every absurd ritual and every moment of triumph over agony. You realize that surviving this place required more than physical toughness. It demanded surrender to discomfort, mastery of humility, and an embrace of the absurd. You step through the gate, the outside world enveloping you in its familiar comforts, paved roads, distant engines, the promise of a warm bed and actual coffee. You pause, hand on the gate's wood, and look back. The training ground stands silent, shrouded in mist and memory. You smile, a little sadly, knowing that part of you remains behind, etched into the dojo's tatami, hidden in its echoing halls, woven into the silent stillness of its early dawns. As you walk away, you understand why a modern person wouldn't last here. It's not just the freezing baths or the sword drills or the mock battles. It's the relentless surrender to ritual, the demand to embrace pain as purpose, the unending cycle of breakdown and renewal. It's a world without Wi-Fi, without convenience, where every breath and movement is a lesson in endurance and absurd dignity. Back in your own time, you'll tell stories, tales of agony and absurdity, of transformations forged in ice and steel. People will listen, marvel, laugh, and perhaps wince. And deep down, you'll know. You didn't just survive a samurai training school in Feudal Japan, you were remade by it. Your bones may creak and your muscles may groan, but your spirit carries the echo of that ancient bell at 3 a.m. every time you face a challenge. Because once you've been wrought in such a crucible, ordinary pain feels like a gentle breeze. And that, dear modern warrior, is why you wouldn't last, unless, of course, you're willing to embrace suffering as your master and let it carve you into something unexpectedly legendary. Imagine charging across a blood-soaked plain, full bronze cuirass weighing down your every breath, while arrows whistle past your ear like angry hornets, and the ground beneath you transforms into a morass of mud and corpses. You glimpse the enemy phalanx bearing down, a solid wall of spears sharper than your poor life expectancy, and realize your only options are a heroic last stand or an embarrassingly quick squish under their sandals. Sound fun? Stick around. You yank yourself from the relative safety of modern air conditioning into the Bronze Age, where the average soldier's lifespan on the battlefield is measured in heartbeats, not years. Congratulations, you're about to discover why you die faster than you can say hoplite. Let's dive headlong into this prehistoric nightmare. The dawn scamper. You wake in a circular tent before the sun, body still screaming from last night's disciplined march. 6 miles in full panoply, shield straps gouging your shoulders like miniature daggers. You sit up on your goat hair bedroll, trying to ignore the metallic ache in every joint. Around you, 50 other soldiers groan in unison, all wrapped in wool and bronze. No stretch and yawn routine here. Instead, the sergeant bellows, "Armor on!" You fumble with leather thong and bronze fittings. Oh, look, your greaves are on backwards again, and stagger outside into pale dawn light. Your morning ration arrives in the form of a half-stale barley biscuit and a cup of goat's milk so sour it makes your face scrunch. You gulp it down under the watchful eye of the quartermaster, who grades your posture and chewing speed as if you were filing a report. Any slowness earns a sharp jab from his spear butt. Yes, even breakfast is a boxing match. By 6 a.m., you've shoved food down your throat, strapped on a circular shield the size of a large dinner plate, and hefted a thrusting spear tipped with bronze, heavy but gloriously lethal. The sergeant lines you up with the rest of the phalanx, tight rows of soldiers forming a lethal hedgehog. Your shield overlaps with your neighbor's, creating a wall thicker than castle bricks. Sounds reassuring? Think again. Phalanx 101, spear point versus human flesh drill begins immediately. You step forward on command, spear leveled at imaginary Persians, or whichever neighboring hill folk your overlord despises this season. The goal is to point your spear so precisely that it cleaves an enemy into two before they can even sneeze. You lunge, only to catch your toe on the back of the man in front, sending your spear spinning into the air. In slow motion, you see it arc back and narrowly miss gouging the thigh of the soldier behind you. He screams in pain, and you realize you've just nearly committed fratricide. Oops. Your sergeant's face twists into a snarl. Again. He has the stamina of a wild boar. Round and round you march, shield pressing into your ribcage, toes blistering. Sweat soaks your linen undergarments and drips down into your leather belt. Minutes stretch into a century before the sergeant finally calls a halt. But there's no rest. He immediately begins inspecting shields for dents and lining up men for shield drill, death by shove, until each shield wall is seamless. Any gaps? He'll find them, and you will find yourself doing push-ups in Spartan style until your arms give out. The arrow buffet. Once your phalanx passes inspection, the next nightmare begins. The archery screen. You shuffle into formation behind woven wicker shields propped on stakes. Your job: pretend you're an immovable object while lines of archers unleash bronze-tipped arrows right at you. They aim to keep enemy archers at bay, but their accuracy is generous. Half of their bolts sail over the shields and plop into the mud around you. The other half thump into wicker, bronze shield boss, and, if you're unlucky, straight into your shoulder. You splay out a startled yelp as bronze pierces flesh, but blood spurts so quickly that you don't even feel the warm slick until you taste it. Stand firm, the archery captain commands. So you grit your teeth, swallow bile, and pretend you're unhurt, because any sign of weakness draws attention and a reminder that weak warriors make weak empires, scavenging for comfort. At last, the archery onslaught ends. You limp to a shallow trench where medics, or what passes for field medics, await with clay poultices and rough linen bandages. They scrub your wound with vinegar so strong it feels like lava, then wrap it in linen so tight you can't move your arm. They mumble that infection is the real killer, and unless you scrub that wound daily, you'll borrow the ground sooner than later. You nod, too delirious to care, and stagger back to the tent line. Here, you find your brothers in arms rummaging through gear. Some swap spare bronze helmets, others burn willow bark in earthen bowls to chase off rats. You try to clean your wound, no water cooler here. You dunk your bandage in a muddy stream upstream of the river where everyone bathes. Mistake. You later discover that river water is a bacterial free-for-all, a conveyor belt to septicemia. But right now, you're too cold to argue. You huddle by a small fire, gulping another cup of sour goat's milk, and watch steam rise off your bandage, the beefcake cavalry. By mid-morning, orders come down, flank maneuver. That means you, foot soldier, must run alongside the super cool cavalry. These horsemen wear scale armor that glints like molten bronze and wield curved swords. Their horses thunder past, tongues lolling, manes flying. Their riders glance back, bored, and gesture for you to keep up. So you huff and puff, running through mud that sucks off your boots, while arrows from distant skirmishers whiz past. After 20 minutes, you collapse behind a clump of reeds, panting like a dying boar. The cavalry rode off to capture supply wagons. You're left choking on dust and shame. Siege, Schmege. Back in formation you go, for the siege tutorial. You reach a crumbling hill fort, battered by months of rain. The engineers have erected wooden towers and ram contraptions, teaching you how to push a battering ram and hurl flaming javelins. You heft the ram's massive oak beam and join 40 men pushing. It barely moves. The captain proclaims, "Push, you beasts!" You shove with all your might, straining biceps and back muscles you didn't know existed. The ram shifts an inch. The engineer fumes and orders grape shot to be loaded instead. Except no one bothered to fetch ammunition, so you improvise by hurling clay pots of burning pitch. Some overshoot, some douse your own shields in sticky fire. Fun. In another corner, you watch soldiers banging on siege towers. One collapses mid-ascent, pinning 2 men underneath. There's a lot of screaming. You wonder if engineering school also covers emergency funeral rites. Spoiler, it does, because within days you'll attend several makeshift pyres as comrades die from infection, stress fractures, or, if you're lucky, heroic wounds. Lunch, or what passes for it. At high noon, they call meal. You line up for gruel, a watery porridge of barley, salt, and goat fat. Sometimes they toss in dried figs or lentils if food stores are good. Today, it's lentilless. You bow your head, ladle the gruel into your mouth, trying not to gag on the gritty grains. You glance sideways at the cavalrymen, munching smoked meat and cheese. Jealousy clenches your gut tighter than your bandages. A sergeant stomps by, ordering you to swallow faster. You snap your mouth shut and nod like a well-trained ox. Heatstroke and other colleagues. The midday sun beats down like a giant pottery kiln. Bronze helmets trap heat, and shields reflect back scorching rays. You feel dizzy, sweat pouring down your back, knees trembling. The quartermaster notices and asks if you're all there. You smile weakly, failing to mention your vision blurs. A comrade collapses nearby, helmet kicked off to reveal a pale face. They pour water on his head, but the heat stroke marches on. A few moments later, he convulses and is carried off. Someone mutters, "Kid died of mercy." And the group moves on because there's no time for mourning. Charge of the something afternoon brings the climactic battle simulation. The sergeant forms you into a wedge formation, point at the enemy fortification, shield rings overlapping, spears ready. You can almost hear the Heart of Courage theme playing, if you had a theme song. The enemy walls bristle with archers and javelin throwers. You advance, each step a battle between lugging gear and staying upright. Someone yells, "Charge!" You lift your spear, surge forward, and immediately sink ankle deep in mud. You topple forward, dragging 4 men down in a domino collapse. Now you're all tripping, screaming, shields clattering. The sergeant roars, "Get up, you slugs!" You scramble upright, yanked back into formation, shame burning red. For 5 brutal minutes, you hurl spears, catch arrows, push on shields. Dust clouds swirl, punctuated by grunts and groans. You feel adrenaline in your veins, equal parts fear and rage. You might even start to enjoy the primal chaos, until an enemy ram threatens to squash your flank. You leap aside, but your spear gets caught, twisting violently in your hand. You hear a sickening crack. Pain sears up your arm. You stumble away, dropping shield and spear. You find cover behind a shattered siege tower, clutching your broken arm. Of course there's no medic in sight. This is war, not a spa retreat. Twilight homecoming. As dusk descends, the sergeant finally calls retreat. The survivors limp back to camp, dragging shattered weapons and wounded bodies. Fires are lit. The smell of wood smoke mingles with sweat and fear. You hobble to the makeshift infirmary, clutching your arm. A medic greets you with vinegar and linen. Cheerful fellow, that one. He mutters about delaying amputation by a day or two, if you're lucky. You grit your teeth, hoping to wake up tomorrow instead of being carted off to the valley of the dead. Back in your tent, you strip off armor and sink onto your goat hair bedroll. Every inch of your body screams in protest. The gruel you brought for supper sits untouched. You stare at it, contemplating the meaning of life, the universe, and why you thought bronze weapons were a good idea. A buddy tosses you an earthen mug of watered wine, cheap stuff that tastes like fermented glue. You gulp it down, wince, then pass out. Congratulations, modern warrior. You survived one day in a Bronze Age army, maybe the easiest day of many. Tomorrow, you'll face real steel, actual bloodbaths, and an even slimmer chance of surviving to see the dawn. And if you do survive, well, count yourself lucky, and maybe consider a career in lobbying or software engineering instead. Trust me, your bones will thank you. The sun hasn't even risen yet when the trumpeters blast the reveille, a sound like a herd of angry goats being mauled by cymbals. You roll out of your tent, the world still dull gray, and immediately realize that frost has claimed your bedding overnight. You shake out clumps of ice from your tunic and stagger toward the morning lineup, where 50 gaunt figures huddle in frozen formation. No coffee yet, just the promise of another day's torment. Today's itinerary reads like a sadist's bucket list. Hand-to-hand combat drills, endurance march in full kit, river crossing under arrow fire, and the joy of sleeping on death-cold stones. But the real show begins with the weapon synergy drill, pairing infantrymen with slingers to learn coordination. You're matched with a wiry youth nicknamed Pebbles, who grins like he's about to prank you, rather than partner you. He hoists a leather satchel of lead bullets over his shoulder. You heft your shield and dented sword. Your mission? Advance together. He lobs a volley of stones. You close in to finish with the blade. Simple in theory. In practice, chaos reigns. The sergeant barks, "Move!" and off you go, slogging through the wet grass that soaks your greaves. Pebbles pauses, lobs a shot, somewhere between a hail of frozen kerns and a hail of confusion, and the lead bullet whistles past your ear. You flinch, juggle your shield, lose grip on your sword. It clatters into the mud. Pebbles gives you a thumbs up and picks it up for you. You feel grateful, but also deeply offended that a guy half your size just rescued your weapon. You resume advancing. He fires again, this time nailing a training dummy square in the chest, while you wait ahead, hinging at the hips, sweat and mud slopping over your belt. It's only a 5-minute drill, but feels like an epic campaign. When it ends, the sergeant roars that your footwork is sloppy, your timing abysmal. You bow your head as he lectures, cheeks stinging from the cold wind. Pebbles pats you on the back. "Don't sweat it, rookie. You'll get the hang of it when tetanus sets in. Charming, mud's your new best friend." Next, endurance march. You think back to that morning's creaky calves and wonder why you ever signed up for a Bronze Age retreat. The route is 8 miles, circular, looping through swamp, hillside, and dense scrub. The sergeant insists on full kit. Bronze chestplate, greaves, helmet, sword, shield, and a flask of brackish water. You stumble through slush knee-deep, worried you'll have to retrieve your shield once you inevitably lose it in the mud. Scouts sprint ahead, coming back to urge you faster. Enemy cavalry approaching. You lurch forward, adrenaline making you ignore the ache ripping through your spine. Halfway up a muddy incline, you see Georgia, another trainee, lying face down in the mire. She waves weakly as you approach. "Thought this was a swimming lesson," she jokes, lips blue. You haul her up, only to feel your own boots sink into a watery trap. It takes 3 of you to free each other. The sergeant sees and orders both of you to do 20 burpees as punishment for unprofessional entanglement. You grit your teeth, huff through the burpees, then resume the march. Boots heavier now that they're full of sludge. Swamp gives way to hillside at last. The gradient's murderous, but the wind's whipping off the ridge like a catapult. You press on, imagining the view from the top. Probably just more hills and more mud. Finally, you crest the hill and glimpse a wide river below, swift and cold. "River crossing," the sergeant announces gleefully. You stare. There are no boats, just a rope suspended overhead and knotted every few feet. You must traverse by gripping the rope and inching across, feet grazing the icy water below while shifting with shield and kit. Your turn arrives. You grab the rope, swing your shield to your back, and inch forward. The rope creaks and sags, your knuckles whitening. Midway, you glance down. The current surges like a hungry beast. Your heart pounds so hard you swear even your teeth can hear it. You steady your breathing, shift hands, and inch again, until your armored thigh slips, and you plunge into the river. The shock of cold steals your breath. You flail, mist forming with each exhale. The current grabs your shield, tugs it downriver. You kick madly, finally haul yourself out on the opposite bank, sputtering, trailing riverweed. The sergeant just shakes his head. Good recovery. Now swim back with your shield. You stare, consider refusing, then realize refusal equals a week of axe-throwing drills bare-handed. You plunge back, retrieve the shield, and haul your dripping, shivering body onto the bank. Victory never felt so much like defeat. Lunch? Barely. By noon, everyone's ravenous, but the meal consists of dry flatbread, a few olives, and a hunk of goat cheese that's gone fuzzy around the edges. You sit cross-legged in a mud enclosure, chewing furiously while wary eyes from squadmates check if you have enough for a trade. You offer a piece of cheese to Pebbles, who shakes his head. "Save it for the lion pit later," he whispers. You swallow a bite of bread and steel yourself. Combat circle, real hands, real faces. Post-lunch fun, hand-to-hand contest in the combat circle. A shallow pit lined with slippery stone. Paired fighters face off, leather paddings and spiked gloves optional. You get matched with Milo, towering, broad-shouldered Milo, who once snapped a spear shaft with his bare hands. You clench your fists and step into the circle, heart fluttering. The referee gives the nod. Milo advances, jabs a fist that would dent a lamppost. You dodge, lunge, connect with his ribs. He grunts, not from pain, but surprise. You grin and swing for his shoulder. Your glove plus metal studs bite into his flesh. Sort of. He flicks his arm out, sending you stumbling across the pit. You fall, slide on wet stone, and crash into the wall. You yank yourself up, ears ringing, ready to quit. But the sergeant bellows, "Finish him!" You dive at Milo's legs, wrap your arms around him and pull. He barely sways. You strain, face cracking, arms shaking like wet noodles. He turns, grabs you by the scruff, sets you on the ground with a thud. "Good spirit," he says, "but I'm the boulder, you're the pebble." The referee raises Milo's fist. You exit the pit, dignity bruised but oddly proud you didn't get thrown out. Siegecraft 2.0, Fire and Fury. Afternoon brings advanced siegecraft. You return to that battered hill fort, but today's curriculum involves fire darts, arrows dipped in pitch and set ablaze. You must light them, load them onto a short bow, and shoot into target rings 50 yards away. Sadly, tarring process means pitch dripping everywhere, onto your hands, your tunic, your boots. You cringe as one arrow ignites your sleeve. You rip it off, drop it on the ground, and stomp out the mini inferno. The bowmaster lectures on the synergy of flame and flight, but all you hear is less flammable clothing. You launch arrow after arrow. Most sail straight into the mud. A few hit the wooden target, but without igniting. You attempt to use a larger javelin to heft the arrow farther, which results in it firing straight up arc of flame trailing like a comical 4th of July display. You duck. Arrow lands 30 feet behind you. The engineers call it experimental brilliance. You call it an expensive lesson in geometry. The regiment of rats. Back at camp, rumor spreads that the blacksmith discovered rats gnawing on stored grain. As a punishment and lesson in vigilance, the entire company must spend an hour hunting rats with wooden clubs. You fan out across the palisades perimeter, clubs at the ready. The rats, wiser than humans, stay hidden. You fling club at shadows, catch nothing but air. You swear you hear a rat laughing. Finally, you spot one on a fence post. You raise your club and miss. The rat leaps to safety. You curse, trudge back empty-handed, and face the quartermaster's disappointment. He orders you to sharpen 40 spear points until you can see your reflection in the bronze. You groan but comply. At least you're avoiding another rat encounter. Sunset drills, shield wall undergoed. As the day wanes, you reform the phalanx for sunset drills. The sergeant decides to simulate panic. He sends a scout to break through at random points. When the scout charges, those nearby must wedge their shields to block him. It's a test of cohesion and controlled freakout. You huddle in the shield wall, heart thumping. Suddenly the scout bucks forward, yells like a banshee, and shoves hard. Shields creak. You lean back, knees bending, wrestling against the force. You strike at the scout with your sword's palm, officially legal in this drill, and he tumbles back. Victory. The sergeant nods once. You hold firm under pressure. Good. Except for your foot placement, 2 inches too far left. He points them out on your sandaled foot. You adjust, ankles screaming, then proceed to hold the shield wall as 3 more scouts charge in quick succession. At the end, your arms feel like jelly, your eyes sting from grit, but at least you didn't break. Nightfall's cold embrace. With darkness settling, torches are lit, and the sergeant declares night watch for everyone. You're on duty from dusk until 2 hours before dawn. Your task, patrol the perimeter and keep an eye out for raiders, deserters, stray wolves, anything that moves. You clutch your spear, breathe mist into the air, and trudge the wooden palisade walkway. Every creak, every rustle in the trees sends your heart bounding. You wave at comrades on watch. They wave back half-heartedly, eyes drooping. After an hour, you're so cold you can't feel your fingers. Your knees tremble. You brace against a post and nearly fall asleep upright. You kick yourself awake, fling your head around, convince yourself a deer just scurried by. You peer into the darkness, heart pounding, then realize it was just a stray shadow. Emboldened by your courage, you roar into the night, an unintentionally comedic beast call that echoes through the trees. Nearby soldiers stir, groan, and one mumbles, "Shut up, beast. We know you're just Simon." Finally, at 2 hours to reveille, your watch ends. You trudge back to your tent, snow starting to dust the ground, biting through your cloak. In the tent, someone set a small fire in a portable brazier. Fancy. You collapse beside it, strip off muddied clothes, and attempt to warm frozen limbs. Your body aches, every joint, every muscle fiber, as if you've been run through a meat grinder. You reach for your meager supper ration, some hardtack and a lump of cheese that's grown fuzzy too. You hurl both into the brazier to burn off the mold. Might as well roast them. Anything's better than moldy cheese. Before sleep claims you, you jot a quick note on a scrap of parchment. Day 2, still alive. Chance of survival tomorrow, 7%. You tuck the note into your tunic and lie back. The brazier's embers glow like dying stars. You close your eyes and count backward from 100. 5 minutes in, you're asleep. Visions of muddy fields, clashing shields, and taunting rats dancing in your head. Tomorrow, they promise, the real battle begins. Full-scale engagement with the enemy at dawn. You'll be in the front lines. You'll fight or die, and your story will be one of the thousands lost to the mud and blood of Bronze Age warfare. But for tonight, you cling to slumber, praying your bones hold together, your wounds don't fester, and the trumpet's reveille is just a dream. You wake to the piercing clang of the battle horn, an iron ring so jarring it feels surgically removed from your skull. Dawn has barely broken, pale light filtering through tattered standards and casting long shadows across the camp. Today is the day you either earn eternal bragging rights or join the unglamorous compost heap of Bronze Age casualties. Strap on your gear one more time, shield, sword, helmet, and that one remaining shard of confidence. The general's speech, or something like it. You shuffle into formation on the damp grass, half asleep but fully terrified. The general, a bronzed veteran whose beard looks like tangled wire, strode before you. He bellows about honor, glory, and the motherland, but you tune out after blood-soaked. All you hear is your heart hammering in your ears and the distant groan of coffins being readied. He ends with, "Remember your training, trust your comrades, and may the gods have mercy." Mercy, you think, would have been nice weeks ago. forming phalanx under fire. Your unit falls into a square, shields front, spears ready, archers hunkered inside with quivers full of doom. The enemy line sprawls opposite, more soldiers than you've ever seen, glinting bronze helms and waving banners with snarling beasts. The ground between you is churned to sloppy porridge by yesterday's maneuvers. You glance at your neighbor, eyes wide. He gives a stiff nod, as if to say, "Let's get this over with." At the whistle's shrill blast, your archers loose the first volley. You barely feel the thunder of arrows shearing air, but the enemy response is immediate. A hail of javelins descends. You raise your shield just in time to catch 3 heavy shafts in the boss. 2 graze your forearm, tearing linen and drawing a thin ribbon of blood. No time to bleed. You grip your spear, feet planted in the soggy earth, and press forward, step by synchronized step, the phalanx rolling like a deadly tide. Mud's a merciless ally. Advancing means nothing if the mud sucks your sandals off. You stumble twice, nearly face-planting into your compatriot's shield. He swears under his breath. You mumble an apology that's lost in the cacophony. The general's voice booms over the din, though you can't make out the words. You thrust your spear at the nearest enemy, point catching on bronze cuirass. Harmless. You pull it free, pivot, and swipe with your gladius. The blade finds flesh beneath the arm, a wet crunch. The man staggers, collapses into the morass. You breach the outer line, fleeting triumph before the next wave crashes over you. The push. The enemy's phalanx grinds against yours like 2 stones being rubbed together. Shields creak, spears shiver, and the air is thick with groans. You shove with all your might, your inner thighs screaming, vision narrowing to tunnel. Suddenly, the enemy breaks. A gap yawns wide enough to glimpse grass beyond. Your sergeant bellows, "Exploit!" and you surge forward, abandoning tight formation for brutal chaos. It's every soldier for himself. Spears overhead, his shields clattering, sweat and blood pooling at your feet. You lunge, parry, roll, and stab. An enemy soldier swings a warhammer. You deflect with your shield but taste metal as it glances off your helm, wringing your teeth together. You stagger, heart pounding so violently you fear it'll punch through your ribs. The cavalry's grand entrance. Then, a thunderous roar. Cavalry, bronze-clad riders on timber-strong horses charge the flank of the enemy. You glimpse the flash of curved swords, the stamping of hooves, and adrenaline rockets through your veins. You sprint to meet them, unsheathing your blade to greet riders ripping through infantry. One rider loses his horse on a hidden rock. You duck beneath his swing and drive your sword into his thigh. He howls, collapses, and you sprint on, side by side with the riders, feeling like a gladiator in some savage circus. A moment of horror. In the turmoil, you notice a fallen comrade, weak brother Jonas, trapped under a collapsed shield wall. Screams surround you, but his is the loudest. You wrench free a half-broken shield boss and lever the shield upright, dragging Jonas out. His eyes are wide, face ghostly pale. You rip off your cloak and wrap it around his wound, realizing your own arms are slick with his blood and yours. There's no healer here, only the promise of infection. A rider slaps you on the back, jerking you onward. "We move!" Their sympathy is grudging, but it's enough. The siege engines loom. Beyond the melee, you spot siege engines, torsion catapults lobbing flaming shot above the lines. A barrage lands in the enemy rear, setting tents ablaze. Smoke twines into the sky. Embers drift down like murderous snow. You swallow the acrid haze, lungs burning, and trudge toward a fallen catapult abandoned by its operators. You pull at the massive release arm, shove with others, and load a fresh bolt. The sergeant hands you a glowing ember. You press it to the pitch, flames catch. You turn, raise the catapult, and hurl a flaming stone into the enemy's supply wagons. It crashes, wood splinters, and the wagons erupt in flame. A cheer rises from your side, brief reprieve from carnage, and enemy. You forget you feared panting. You lean on your spear, surveying the devastation, bodies, broken gear, horses thrashing. Then, from the smoke, a huge figure strides forth, an enemy champion, helmet crested with boar's tusks, shield emblazoned with a snarling wolf. He stomps through your lines, crushing shields, felling men with a single swing. Your comrades falter, panic flares, you grip your gladius, heart in your throat. He eyes you, strides closer, hammer poised. You brace, voice cracking. For glory, you charge. He swings, massive arc. Wind whooshes your hair. You duck, roll, slash his calf. He roars, steps on your foot, and lifts you like a rag doll. You kick, claw at his helm, vision dimming at the edges. Then, clang, a lancer spear finds his back. He roars and drops you. You hit the mud, gasping as the wolf crest falls beside you. You crawl away, stunned, chest heaving. The tide turns. The champion's fall ushers in a shift. Enemy morale crumbles. Your soldiers rally, pushing forward in a final savage drive. You join the fray, adrenaline masked as rage. Shields crash, spears snap, and you dispatch foes in rapid succession, each thrust accompanied by a grim thought, one less spear at me. By mid-morning, the enemy line buckles. A final scream, clatter of weapons, and they break, fleeing back toward their own camp. Your general, clothes soaked in gore, sounds a triumphant horn. A cheer goes up, ragged but victorious. You collapse to one knee, vision smudged with sweat and blood, tasting iron in your mouth. You've survived the bloodiest hour of your life. Aftermath, not for the faint of heart. Silence falls except for moans. Wounded litter the field, some reaching for water, some too broken to move. The medics hurry through, cutting away armor, packing wounds with burning herbs that smell of sorrow. You manage to stagger over to Jonas. He's conscious, bandaged but alive. You clasp his hand. He grins weakly. Next time, he rasps, we bring biscuits. You laugh hoarsely, leaning on your shield. Your wounds ache. 2 spear grazes on your arm, a hammer bruise on your ribs, and the memory of being flung like a rag. You realize your leather boots have slipped twice, mud soaked through to your socks, heels bleeding. You sink yourself in a shallow trench dug for Sumerian cannoneers. No sleep nor rest here. It's the makeshift field hospital. A medic slathers your wounds with a crusty salve and wraps linen so tight your arm tugs at the socket. He mutters, "Infections kill more than weapons. Wash well, if you can." You nod, though you know the river's downstream from the latrines. Surviving feast? By midday, the victors feast on captured supplies. Dried meat, salted fish, stale bread, and surprisingly sweet dates pillaged from enemy wagons. You tear into a hunk of cured pork, savoring each fatty bite. A comrade offers a skin of wine. You clink horns and drink deep, fire trickling down your throat. For a moment, there's laughter. Stories of near misses, confessions of cowardice, boasts of ghastly kills. You join in, voice hoarse but triumphant. But the wounds of war linger. You notice the look in a fellow soldier's eyes, gone distant, pupils glazed. He smiles, then collapses into a fit of coughing. You remember the oat milk from your childhood breakfast, the softness of your mother's embrace, the comfort of knowing tomorrow would be easy. Here, tomorrow is another fight. Night shrouds the field. As dusk creeps in, fires are lit in pits to burn the dead. The smell of charred flesh and damp smoke hangs heavy. You stand at the edge, watching bodies wheel in the flames. Once men, now fuel. A veteran beside you recites a dirge. You can't remember the last time you heard real music. You close your eyes and find yourself humming a jingle from home. The absurdest comfort in a world gone mad. Your tent is nothing but a flimsy tarp strung between poles. You crawl in, every joint a protest. Jonas is there, arms slung in a makeshift sling, face ghost white. You pass him your remaining water skin. He nods gratefully. He whispers, "We did it." You lie back, staring at the mottled sky and count distant stars. If tonight's watch drags, you'll lose count. As you drift toward exhaustion, you wonder, how many more dawns must you survive? How many spears must you break? And when you return home, if you live long enough, will anyone understand the weight of bronze on your shoulders, the smell of mud and blood forever seared into your senses? You fall asleep to the low rumble of morning bells, sleep heavy and troubled, praying the gods remember you, and maybe, just maybe, grant you another sunrise. As the smoke of victory clears, there's no rest for the weary. Day 3 is a brief reprieve. More drills, more bloodied bandages, and the ever-present threat of disease. But dawn on day 4 brings the true ordeal, your first real battle. Today, you'll join the veteran legion at the front lines of the border dispute you've been training for. Strap on your bronze greaves one last time. This is where theory meets chaos. You rise before the sun, muscles stiff as iron traps. The camp is a ghostly silhouette of tents and wooden barricades against the pale sky. Nothing soothes you. Not the promise of plunder, not the rousing war horns, not even the handful of olives slipped to you by the quartermaster's daughter. You step into your armor, each piece clicking like a judge's gavel. Helmet, cuirass, greaves, and at last, the shield. It's nicked, dented, and covered in crusted mud, but it's yours. You fasten your sword belt, heft your spear, and force yourself to swallow a spoonful of barley porridge that tastes like chalk mixed with regret. The general strides among the ranks, inspecting rows of bronze-clad bodies. He stops before you, jabs a gauntleted finger at your chest plate, and intones, "Today we test our mettle. Today we decide who rules these hills." You nod, but inside you're panicking. Metal? You barely have metal. A dozen wagons of provisions rumble by. Olive oil, dried fruit, salted fish, and you wonder if any of it will make its way back. A trumpeter sounds the charge, and your unit surges forward, shields locked, heels churning the loose gravel. The ground tilts upward toward the enemy fort, a meandering rampart crowned with sharpened stakes. From the rampart, enemy archers rain down spears tipped with poison, and arrows barbed like porcupine quills. The whistle of projectiles is a grim serenade. Each volley feels like the gods hurling darts at your heart. You reach the base of the rampart, gasping for air. The sergeant barks, "Form testudo." You raise your shield overhead, creating a tortoise shell of bronze. It's the only defense against the barrage, but your arms tremble, and after 30 seconds they threaten to collapse. Still, you hold firm, sweat beading under your helmet, shield boss glinting with the impact of arrows like nails hammered into a coffin. When the whistle blows, you drop into a shielded crouch and advance, step by agonizing step. The rampart looms. Ladders lean against its face. Behind you, comrades clutch torches and pitch pots of burning pitch. The plan? You storm the walls while flanking units set fire to the enemy's wooden towers. It's beautiful in its brutality. A fellow soldier beside you slips, yelps, and drops his shield. You whirl, snatch it, and shove it into his hands. He nods, eyes wild with gratitude. Together you approach the ladder. You brace your shield against its base, then tug at the rungs. They hold. You hoist yourself up, training your feet into the wood, while favorites behind you push. You reach the top rung and swing your shield over the wall, using its rim to drag yourself up. You catch a glimpse of the enemy below, faces twisted in shock, hastily grasp spears clattering. You brace for the push-off. A javelin thuds into wood beside your head, splinters skittering. You yelp, fling yourself backward, and pivot to push upward again. Your heel slips. You teeter. A hand grabs your ankle and hauls you to safety. Pebbles that wiry slinger from training, grinning like a maniac. "Couldn't let you hog the wall," he jokes. Then heaved together, you both shimmy over the top. Atop the rampart, the world falls away. You find yourself in a fever of clashing weapons and screaming men. You raise your shield to block a downward blow from a barbarian's axe, steel biting wood, splinters flying. You slump backward, chest heaving, and thrust your spear into his midsection. He stumbles, gurgles, and collapses into a heap of furs and blood. You yank your spear free, panting, knees weak. Your heart slams at the realization, this is it. Flesh, bone, and bronze up close and inescapable. There is no drill here. No instructor's calm voice. There is only the sickening thud of combat and the desperate grip of survival. You swing your sword at another foe, an adversary clad in scale armor that glitters even in the gloom. Your blade glances off, leaving a scar but no wound. He counters, and you block with your shield, starburst of pain radiating through your forearm. You bash him with the shield's rim, ribs cracking with the impact, and drop him in a crumpled heap. Behind you, flanking units send torches skittering across the rampart, and wooden towers ignite in roaring infernos. Flames gutter, casting ghostly light over the battle. Some enemy soldiers leap from the walls, preferring a fall to the inferno. You recoil as a man somersaults past, landing with a bone-chilling crack. For a heartbeat, you envy his escape. Then, a shrill whistle cuts through the din, a signal to regroup. You whirl, nearly taking an arrow to the skull, and dart back to the ladder. You descend, shield first, and land amid your comrades, mud and blood sluicing down your legs. The general thunders, "To the breach!" a command you dimly recall from training but never expected to obey. You lift your shield and race toward the breach in the enemy wall, carved by burning pitch and catapult impact. Past the breach, bodies lie heaped like cordwood. You step over a severed arm, try not to gag. Ahead, you see a standard, tattered, bloodied, fluttering atop a broken palisade. The general points, "Take the standard and break their line." You nod, follow the path of fallen comrades, and sprint toward the broken palisade. Spears proffered, you thrust and parry, forcing your way through the enemy's last defense. A soldier lunges from the side. You duck, lunge upward, and catch him under the chin. His head snaps back. He collapses, eyes blank. You scramble over the palisade, heart pounding, and seize the standard. It's heavy, drenched in ash and mud. You plant it in the soil, and a cheer rises from your side that rivals the clang of the war horn. The enemy falters, then breaks. You watch them flee downhill, legs pumping, shields abandoned. Your own unit presses the advantage, spear wall advancing, swords flashing. Though your arms ache like a smith's bellows, you press on, determined to ride this wave of victory to the bitter ends. By midday, the field is silent but for the groans of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. Smoke curls against the sky, drifting toward the hills you conquered. You stare at the standard you planted, once a symbol of fear, now a trophy. The general strides up, claps you on the shoulder, and roars, "Well done, warrior! You've tasted battle, drunk deeply of blood, and stood triumphant." His praise echoes hollow in your skull. You've stood triumphant, yes, but at what cost? Around you, the wounded are tended by medics dabbing vinegar and applying mustard poultices. The dying are laid on improvised stretchers of canvas and wood to be taken back to the rear for last rites. You help carry one, an old soldier with a spear wound to the thigh. He grips your hand, whispers, "Tell my wife I fought well." You blink, swallow, and vow you will. Camp at dusk brings both relief and sorrow. You stagger back to your tent, every step an ode to agony. You strip off armor, wincing as bruised muscles protest. The medics greet you with bandages and thick salves. They ladle ointment onto your wounds, spear grazes that sting like hornet stings, then wrap you tight in linen. You glance at your hands smeared with soot and blood, and wonder if you'll ever feel clean again. Your supper is a meager feast of roasted goat, flatbread, and a few olives, luxuries after battle. You chew slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a gift. Around the fire, comrades swap war stories, that cavalry charge, the fall of the enemy champion, the collapse of the rampart. Laughter rings out, raucous, furtive, as if laughter could drown the memory of war's horrors. Pebbles sidles up, offering you a skin of wine. You take it gratefully and clink horns. "We made it," he says, eyes bright with relief. You nod, chest tight. "We did," you rasp, voice thick. Night falls again, but your rest is fitful. You lie in your tent, the flap half open to let in cool air. Across the camp, you see the glow of bonfires, some for warmth, some for burning bodies you could not save. You cover your face, inhale the acrid smoke, and count the stars. Each one seems to flicker with remembered screams. In the darkness, you replay the day, the thunder of march, the hail of arrows, the climb up the ladder, the clash on the rampart, the final breach, and the standard planted. You remember comrades' faces, Pebbles, Jonas, the old soldier, and mourn them even as you celebrate victory. At last, exhaustion takes you. You drift into a sweat-drenched sleep, nightmares of mud and gore giving way to unconsciousness. When dawn breaks on day 5, you'll wake again to packing wagons, sending the wounded home and returning to the frontier. There will be festivals, songs sung to commemorate victory, and proclamations in your honor. You'll be feted as a hero, with tankards pressed to your lips and babes on shoulders chanting your name. But those festivals will smell faintly of vinegar, feel rough like linen bandages, and sound distant compared to the bass drum of battle. And when the revelry fades, you'll return to the frontier, because once you've stood in the mud, drenched in blood, the ordinary world seems impossibly soft, impossibly safe. and you'll always remember just how quickly bronze can kill you. So, modern warrior, if you ever find yourself torn between a desk job and a day in the phalanx, remember this. On a Bronze Age battlefield, fear is your only shield, pain your companion, and surviving only the beginning of the nightmare. Imagine stepping off a freight train into a blizzard so fierce it rattles your bones, your breath freezing mid-air into ghostly crystals, only to realize this is your new home. No heat, no proper clothes, and no hope that morning will ever come. Think you'd last? Think again. You shuffle forward in line, numb toes crunching on frozen earth, arms weighted by the thin cotton uniform that's supposed to keep you alive. The guard barks orders in a language you no longer recognize, staccato commands that send a fresh wave of terror through your ribs. Your fellow prisoners, gaunt silhouettes against the white expanse, trade hollow glances. Each of us wonders who will collapse first. By the time the sun dribbles over the horizon, if you can call it sun, your fingers have gone ghost white from frostbite and your lips burn from inhaling snowflakes. There's no coffee to thaw you, only the promise of roll call and work detail. You stumble to attention as the sergeant counts off names, every missed number earning a rifle butt to the shoulder. You flinch, tasting blood in your mouth. Foot forward, foot back. This is how you learn it's best not to fall behind. Breakfast consists of a single ladle of watery gruel, oats boiled in lake water so thin it might as well be broth. You grasp the tin cup with both hands, careful not to spill a drop, because tomorrow's ration might vanish if you look hungry. You swallow quickly, the cold gruel scraping down your throat like sandpaper, and realize it's already gone. Now comes the march to the logging site, 2 miles across knee-deep snow, hauling a 2-man saw and a satchel of nails. You lift the saw, its steel teeth dulled by rust, and clamp your teeth against the cold metal strap, bracing for the shoulder-splitting drag. Each step feels like wading through liquid nitrogen. Your breath hisses out in puffs of steam that vanish instantly. At the timber camp, the overseer grins, a cruel expression that promises misery. You and your partner hoist a felled pine trunk onto your shoulders and stagger toward the saw pit. "Faster!" he snarls, unleashing his dog to nudge stragglers. The dog snaps at your heels, teeth grazing your uniform. You leap into position at the saw, your partner on the other end. Together you saw back and forth, the blade biting wood, splinters flying in icy bursts. Every stroke is an act of will against a body that wants to collapse. By noon, your hands are raw and bleeding, each breath punctuated by the metallic sting of cold air. You're soaked in sweat under layers of damp cotton. When you step outside, the sweat freezes instantly, coating you in a thin layer of lethal armor. You shiver violently but swallow down the urge to lie in the snow. Fallen prisoners don't get back up. Lunch is worse than breakfast. A chunk of freeze-dried cabbage soup, so sour it makes your eyes water. You attempt to chew the cabbage, but its texture resembles cardboard soaked in vinegar. You force it down, mindful that swallowing too slowly draws the overseer's ire. One prisoner tries to hoard a few scraps under his tongue, but is caught and beaten for his cunning. You gulp the rest, wishing you could puke without freezing solid. In the afternoon, it's back to work, hauling logs to the makeshift sawmill, then carrying planks to the construction site of the new guard towers. Each poorly built plank snaps under weight, slamming into your shoulder with a dull crack. You grit your teeth, convinced your arm has fractured, but no medic comes for hours, if ever. You press on, fueled by the faint hope that finishing this tower means fewer beatings. As dusk falls, the temperature plunges further. Your uniform offers no insulation. Your boots leak slush that chills your toes to the marrow. The guards herd you back to the barracks, wooden huts barely taller than your head, packed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of shivering bodies. You find a corner on the frozen floor, lie down, and pull your knees to your chest. The only heat comes from the shared body warmth, if you can call it that. The man beside you snores, expelling clouds of frosty breath. Nighttime roll call interrupts any chance of real rest. The guards shout names in the dark. Each misstep in answering costs a rifle butt to the shin. You stand, rubbing bruises, teeth chattering uncontrollably. By the time the count ends, your legs tremble so hard you wonder if you'll ever walk again. Back in the hut, you press your hands against your belly, trying to spark any warmth. You think of home, of a warm bed, a hot meal, a bath that didn't involve ice, and you realize those memories feel like dreams from another person's life. You close your eyes, embrace the terror, and hope for dawn. Not because another day is a gift, but because each sunrise reminds you you're still breathing, still surviving, at least for now. Welcome to the winter in Stalin's Gulag. If you think this sounds impossible, remember, millions endured far worse, and most didn't make it. The second dawn breaks like a threat rather than a promise. You awaken to the shrill whistle of the guard's bugle, an icy stab through your skull, followed by the crack of a rifle butt against the frozen ground. Your hut's planks moan with the cold. Your breath puffs out in desperate clouds as you clamber to your feet. It's day 2, and your body already protests every movement. Joints locked, muscles quivering, and toes so numb you fear they've turned to ice blocks. No time to linger. The guards fling the doors open, and you spill out into a courtyard glazed with frost. The air tastes like gravel and regrets. The sergeant, wrapped in a fur-lined greatcoat while you shiver in thin cotton, bellows for formation. You scramble into line, feet scraping over ice, shoulders hunched to conserve what little heat remains. Any hesitation, any stumble, earns a savage kick. You press forward, determined not to face that rifle butt again. Roll call is a blur of numbers and names punctuated by curses. When they count you twice by mistake, you freeze until they correct the error, though your heart pounds like you've been sentenced to the firing squad. Once your name is finally crossed off, they herd you toward the woodpile. Today's assignment: firewood gathering and ice breaking at the camp's only water source, a half-frozen river that supplies drinking water to thousands. You trudge across knee-deep snow, boots slipping on concealed ice. At the riverbank, you meet a line of half-starved prisoners already swinging axes. The logs they chop are as thick as your thigh. Their pale, bloodless faces are etched with hopelessness. You seize an axe, its handle splintered, head caked in rust, and join the rhythm, chop, lift, toss onto a sled made of planks and rope. Your arms burn within seconds. Sweat beads at your hairline and freezes instantly. You gasp for breath through numb lungs, but there's no pause, only the relentless demand, "Faster! Move!" A fellow prisoner collapses mid-swing, his axe dropping with a dull thud. He lands in a sprawl, face buried in snow. The guard watches him spasm, then approach with booted contempt. "Get up, worm," he spits, kicking the prone man in the ribs. The prisoner groans, crawls to his feet, and resumes chopping as if he were possessed. You want to turn away, but there's nowhere to hide. If you stop, you'll be dragged into line for strafing by a rifle round, so you chop on, each blow a nail in the coffin of your fingers. Once the sled is loaded, you and 5 others tug it back to camp. The path is treacherous, ice patches hide beneath snow, and the sled catches on concealed stones. You strain against the ropes, the sled's weight wrenching at your shoulders. Each jolt feels like your collarbones are snapping. Your breath is a cascade of steely pain in your throat. Finally, you reach the woodpile next to the barracks, an orange glow of embers your only hint of warmth. You stack the logs for the cookhouse stove, shivering despite the labor, and realize the fire's too small for the mass of bodies inside. Only the guards will really feel that heat tonight. Before you can rest, you're ordered to the riverbank again, this time to break the ice. Armed with pickaxes heavier than your head, you chip away at the frozen surface until you create a narrow trough. The broken ice chunks tumble into the water, cracking and sinking beneath the pale current. You stare into the clearing water, seeing your reflection warped by ripples, and beneath, the black river swirling around submerged corpses of rabbits, random debris, and perhaps a lost man too exhausted to pull himself out. You swallow hard. The water is supposed to be for drinking. You catch the sergeant watching you fold back the ice chunks. It's your turn to haul a bucket of that river water up the bank. You set up a crude filtration, a rag stuffed into the bucket's lip. You dip, haul, and pour into a barrel. The water tastes faintly of metal and drowned nightmares. The next half hour is spent lugging pails back and forth, filling barrels that barely quench the thirst of the camp. With each trip, your legs threaten to buckle under the icy weight. You lose feeling in your hands the moment the pail parts from the water's embrace. Your gloves, if you can call them that, are just 2 layers of cotton. They offer no protection. The sergeant's bark echoes whenever a bucket spills an inch. You call that a ration? Fill it properly or fill your mouth with snow. By late morning, your nose bleeds from the cold. You wipe it against your sleeve and taste iron. You stare at the cookhouse, smoke trickling from its chimney, and wonder if today's soup will be thicker than the gruel of yesterday. Spoiler alert, it won't be. The kettle holds watery cabbage soup spiced only by the sting of desperation. You swallow the broth in 3 hurried gulps, letting it wash the frost from your throat. The cabbage leaves are few, stringy, and possibly rotting. You chew them mechanically, eyes half closed against the squinting sun. Noon brings a brief respite, a word you can't pronounce in this hellscape. Prisoners are allowed a 10-minute break before being marched off to the next task. You lean against the barracks, shivering so violently, you look like you're having a seizure. Nearby, a group of old men share a single blanket, theirs by virtue of disease, not mercy. Their laughter is brittle, like glass breaking in slow motion. You approach, and one of them hands you the blanket without speaking. The warmth floods into you, a balm for your frozen core. You press it around your shoulders, closing your eyes, and for a moment you remember what warmth feels like. Then a guard's heel drives into your shin, and the blanket is torn away. 10-minute break over. The afternoon's work detail is hut repairs. The barracks are rotting wooden shacks where wind whistles through every crack. Today's assignment, seal those cracks with straw and mud. You're given bundles of straw harvested from some distant prisoner's nightmare. You plaster the walls, stuffing straw into gaps, then slather mud over it. The mud is half frozen, so it just flops onto the wall in clumps. You whimper as your fingers flake with dried mud and split open. The overseer tells you, a good seal traps heat. Do better, or you'll sleep outside tonight. The threat is clear. Outside is a tomb. By late afternoon, the soles of your boots have worn thin. You can feel every jagged rock through the flimsy rubber. You limp back to the hut, where the guards force you to stand at attention for another roll call. As they count off missing bodies, one prisoner's name is called more times than it appears on the list. The sergeant snarls, "Double taker," and strikes the hapless man with his club until he bleeds. You avert your eyes, hearing bones crack under the blows. The count continues. Your turn comes, and you answer sharply. Your voice cracks on the final syllable. A guard asks twice, then smacks you across the mouth for your lack of enthusiasm. You taste blood again, swallow it, and hold your ground. Night falls early in this far northern wasteland, a darkness deeper than coal, lit only by the feeble glow of lanterns. You trudge to the cookhouse for the evening meal, a ladle of porridge enriched by a single flake of fish, if you're lucky. Tonight, you're not. They've run out of fish. You drink the gruel, which tastes like dirty river water with off-brand milled oats. You wonder if the fish were eaten by guards on your shift, guards who feast on real meat while you choke down dust. After supper, you're herded back into the huts. The straw bedding is damp and smells of rot. You find a spot between 2 men. One sleeps on a wooden crate, the other on the bare floor. You curl into a ball, trying to share some body heat. The man on the crate snores so loud you can feel the vibrations in your chest. The man on the floor mutters in his sleep about home, about children he'll never see again. You blink away tears you can't afford to cry. Before the lights out whistle, a sentinel storms in and demands 3 volunteers for nighttime coal unloading at the power plant section of the camp. You look around. Everyone is frozen into silence. No one volunteers. The sentinel selects the 3 weakest, an old man, a youth with frostbitten fingers, and you. "Move!" he snaps. You stumble outside again, heart pounding with dread. The power plant doesn't generate heat for prisoners. It produces the electricity for the guards' barracks and the searchlights that scour the perimeter. Your task, unload 50 sacks of coal from rail cars into a storage shed. Each sack weighs at least 60 pounds, filled with icy chunks that sting your bare arms. You stagger to the rail car and pull a sack free. Its burlap stiff from the cold. You hoist it onto your shoulder and stagger toward the shed. The old man collapses beneath his load. The youth's thin fingers slip on the sack's ties. The sentinel wags his bayonet. Move or freeze in place. You help the old man up, urging him forward. You both carry sacks 3 at a time, staggering under the weight. The youth watches, clutching a sack to his chest, eyes wild. You nod for him to move, and he stumbles beside you. You think of your family. If you survive the shift, you might still see them again. But that thought feels like a lie, a cruel trick of the mind. The cold bites through your coat, cutting into your flesh. Sweat beads on your forehead and then freezes in droplets. Your lungs burn. Your muscles tremble. You make your way to the storage shed, shove the sack inside, and collapse to your knees, gasping. Behind you, the sentinel laughs, a sound like cracking ice. Not so easy, is it? He taunts before disappearing into the night. You and the other two stagger back to the hut, coal dust coating your breath. Your uniform smells of soot and mildew. You wash clumsily at a trough of icy water, more river water, barely removing the grime. You dress in your frozen cotton and collapse onto your straw bedding, numb from cold and exhaustion. Sleep comes in ragged breaths, each inhalation a battle against the creeping terror that this will be your final night. In the pre-dawn hours, you're woken once more for one final roll call, a bonus count before the day begins. The hut's cramped and bodies press against your sides. You stand, wobbling, and answer your number. The sergeant sneers. Good, you made it. Now live through today. You swallow the lump in your throat. If today kills you, there will be no tomorrow to mourn. As the lone lantern guttering overhead dips low, casting long shadows over frost-caked faces, you close your eyes for a moment and glimpse the pale slate sky beyond the hut's cracks. You steel yourself, clinging to the mantra you've devised. Survive one more hour, one more task, one more day, because giving into despair means freezing in place, alone, while the world moves on without notice. The bugle's call will sound soon, gunfire will bark, and the endless march into darkness and an uncertain dawn will begin again. You draw a final trembling breath and prepare to step once more into the nightmare of Stalin's winter Gulag. The gray light of dawn barely tinges the sky when the guard's trumpet wails again. Day 3 begins not with hope, but with a dull realization. Your body is failing ahead of schedule. You haul yourself upright from the frozen straw, every joint screaming protest. Your toes tingle with the suspicion that they're already dead, and your fingers feel like brittle twigs you might snap if you dare to clench a fist. Still, the bugle's call is relentless, and you know better than to linger. Outside the hut, the wind bites like a rabid wolf. You pull your tattered coat tighter, though it only delays the cold's invasion. The guards herd you into the courtyard. Roll call is a grim litany of half-remembered names and missing numbers. When a prisoner's name goes unspoken, a rifle butt thuds against the wooden floor, and every head turns. You swallow hard, thankful it's not you this time, but certain your luck will run out. Breakfast is a grim joke. A thin slurp of watery porridge, barely warmed by a half-hearted flame beneath the kettle. You hold the tin bowl cupped in both hands, hoping heat radiates long enough to thaw your palms. You grimace as you sip. The porridge tastes of rancid grain and despair. There's no sugar, no milk, no solace, only the sinkhole of hunger yawning wider. Work detail today is quarry labor. Your march to the rocky ridge overlooking the camp. A steep, jagged slope of pale stone and broken shale. Your task: break the rocks into rubble to shore up the camp's eroding embankment. Each prisoner receives a hammer, the kind that once laid bricks, now repurposed for breaking souls. You take hold of yours, the cold metal burning through your brittle gloves, and follow the chain gang. Guards straggle behind with whips, cracking the air whenever you slow. You crouch at the base of the ridge, hammer raised, and strike. Rock splinters shower like frost petals. Your partner catches fledgling shards in his bare hands, tossing them aside. His palms are bloody, his eyes hollow, but he keeps swinging. You mimic him, ignoring the searing sting, as your skin tears under the glove's thin fabric. Each swing reverberates up your arm, echoes in your shoulder, and resonates in your skull. Minutes stretch into hours as you chip, heave, and carry rubble to waiting wheelbarrows. The slope offers no forgiveness. Snowdrifts conceal treacherous holes that send shovelfuls of rock crashing into the valley below. Your breath comes in ragged gasps. Sweat beads on your brow, then freezes instantly in your hair. You shudder violently, wishing you could stop. But the guard's whip cracks, and you press on. By mid-morning, your arms feel like jelly. You assist in dumping your third wheelbarrow of rubble into the gap, then stagger back to refill your sled. You pray your heart doesn't give out first. Better that than the whip. At noon, there's a brief rest, 10 minutes to gulp down lunch. Today's meal is cabbage broth again, though rumor has it they're mixing in old boots to stretch the ration. You pose the question to the cook's quartermaster, a gaunt woman with sunken cheeks and haunted eyes. She mutters, "Only hope is delusion," and tips a ladleful into your bowl. The cabbage floats like driftwood. You shove it into your mouth, chewing with the desperation of a drowning man. You swallow, choke, and beat back the urge to vomit. regurgitating waste calories you can't spare. Back to the quarry you go, soul 10 feet ahead of body. At the afternoon's climax, prisoners are ordered to hoist a massive slab of granite, 100 pounds at least, up the slope and fit it into place along the embankment. You and 6 others clasp the slab's edge, fingers numb and slipping. You heave together, the slab shifts, and for a moment you believe it will fall. Someone behind you screams as the slab tilts and lands on his foot. He howls, collapses, and the guard kicks him into motion. You reach down, scoop him up under one arm, and press him into the line. One survivor's duty is to keep the mission alive, no matter the cost. By late afternoon, your muscles tremble outright, unable to stand. The rocks are all placed. Guards order the prisoners to inspect the embankment, tapping stones with hammers to ensure each is solid. You mime compliance. Your hammer hand quivers so badly you cannot swing. The guard approaches, eyeing you like carrion. "What's wrong, Frostworm?" he hisses. Before you can muster a reply, he strikes your hammer arm with his baton, and you slump to one knee, vision dimming around the edges. Somehow, you manage to tap the stones, anguished pulses ricocheting through your body. As dusk coils in, the prisoners are marched back to camp. Your arm throbs with every step, the pain a dull roar beneath your ribs. The guards allow no slack. If you falter, you face the dog and the whip. You press on until, thankfully, the barracks loom into sight. You collapse inside, clutching your arm, and crawl toward the infirmary. The medic's hut is a single room, with cots crammed together. The stench of boils and stale blood enervates your senses. You wave him down. He slathers your arm with an unguent that reeks of burnt sunflower petals and chemicals. You hiss as it touches the wound. He binds it in linen so tight you feel your elbow go numb. "Infections get you faster than frostbite," he mutters. "Keep it clean, as much as you can." Nightfall brings the usual roll call, an anticlimax you've learned to dread. The prisoner next to you coughs violently, blood spattering the wooden floor. Guards jostle him, dousing him with buckets of icy water to toughen him up. You flinch, shivering at the splashes. The man collapses unconscious. He's carried off to the punishment hut, and you know you'll hear his screams later. You stand until the final count, then collapse back onto your straw. Every inch of your body throbs. Your head feels inflated, skin stretched by pain. Sleep flits in sporadic bursts, dreams of warmth, of home, of a bath that doesn't freeze you solid. Day 4 dawns a shade darker than the day before. You haul yourself up, each movement an exercise in will. Your arm's pain pulses like a second heartbeat. You limp into formation, suppressing the wince on your face. Today's work detail is the worst yet, sewage trench excavation. The camp's latrine overflow must be diverted into a trench that leads beyond the perimeter. You approach the site, a shallow gully, half-frozen, half-congealed sludge that smells of rot and whiskey. Prisoners with rakes and shovels dig through the filth, scooping it into wheelbarrows. You load a rusted shovel and plunge it into the rancid muck. You grip the handle tight, knuckles white, and pull out a shovelful. The sight of rotted rags, human waste, and stray hair makes your stomach churn. You resist gagging, tamp it down, and transfer the muck into the barrow. The wheelbarrow's wheel squeaks under the weight as you push it to the trench's edge and tip it over. The stink swirls around you, clings to your lungs. The overseer strides by, belt riding low, spurs jangling. He spits a stream of tobacco juice, then barks, "Faster, carrion!" A guard next to him draws his dog. You feel the dog's hot breath on your leg. It snaps at you, you flinch, and the guard whacks you with the leash. You pick up speed, shoveling faster, the miasma rising into your face like a living demon. One slip and you plunge into the trench. If you fall, you'll drown in the sewage or be dragged out by the dogs. You work until your hands go numb, your arms burn, and your vision swirls. Then, mercifully, the guard orders a halt. You reel away from the trench, gasping for air that never tastes clean again. Lunch is the same insolent gruel, though today they call it buckwheat porridge, an insult to any grain with that reputation. You shovel it in, craving a piece of bread or a slice of cheese that isn't moldy. Once you finish, you line up for hypothermia exams. Each prisoner stands before a guard holding a lantern. The guard scowls at your pale hands, wraps them around the lantern's grip, and judges the color of your fingers. Frostbite score, level 2, treat in infirmary. There are no beds there. You get a corner next to a window so drafty you can see your breath inside the hut. You clutch your hands to your chest, staring at your fingers, watching the gray shift to blue as the lantern's heat wars with the cold. Afternoon's work detail is log splitting at the woodpile again. You trudge there, body aching from the trench in the quarry and the raid on the embankment. You pick up the cleaver, an axe handle attached to a hack blade, and slit each log into firewood. Each swing is agony, but you keep going, driven by the knowledge that without firewood, no one would have a handful of embers to warm their toes. You work side by side with older prisoners, men who've been here so long their names are rumors. They sweat, they curse, they laugh. Their laughter is brittle, but it's laughter nonetheless. You join in, rasping jokes about the commissar who sent you here, wishing he'd get his own turn to split wood in -40. As dusk wavers, the guard fires his rifle in the air, signal for the end of labor. Prisoners drop their axes and stagger back to camp. Inside the barracks, a handful of men gather around a small brazier someone contrived from spare metal. The fire is meager, no more than a paper match's worth of flame, but they cluster around it like moths, faces glowing orange. You edge in, feeling immediate warmth beneath your coat. A prisoner passes around a chunk of chocolate smuggled in from who knows where. Each man gets a sliver. You let the chocolate melt in your mouth, sweet bliss flooding your senses. For a moment, you forget the trench, the quake of the whip, the rat-tat of the guard's boots on the frozen floor. You close your eyes and taste freedom, just for an instant before reality snaps back. Night roll call follows. Cold steel lamps illuminate rows of gaunt faces as they answer their numbers. When you finish, a guard orders you to remain standing for an insufficient spirit, then marches off. Others stray to wash in the latrine trough, but you avoid it. Water's too icy and risk of falling in too great. You tuck into your corner, pulling your arms inside your coat, trying to preserve warmth. The man with frostbitten fingers sits beside you, murmuring about his lost digits. You hold his hand. Your one functioning hand cradles his broken one, and say nothing. Words are useless here. Before sleep, you recall the sunlit fields of home, the smell of fresh laundry, the comfort of a warm mattress. Those images feel like ruins of another life, unreachable and faint. You close your eyes, choking back tears you forgot you could shed. You repeat your mantra, survive one more day, because each sunrise is both torture and triumph. The affirmation you're still here, still breathing, still clinging to the thread of life in this frozen tomb. When the bugle screeches at midnight for firewood distribution, another shift for those unlucky, you sit still, hoping your name isn't called. But luck runs out eventually, and you know your dawn will come again, heralding another parade of misery. For now, you cling to the fragile warmth of dreams, hoping sleep lasts longer than the cold. Day 5 shatters what little rhythm you'd managed to carve out of this frozen hell. The dawn trumpet wails at 5 a.m., a merciless anthem that drags you from whatever scraps of dream you'd stitched together in the darkness. You haul yourself upright, limbs creaking as though each bone has declared mutiny. Your fingers, wrapped in tape and frozen gauze, sting with a hunger for warmth. You swallow bile that tastes like regret and steel yourself for another round. By 5:30, you're in formation outside the barracks. The guards march past, boots punching the ground in heavy staccato, while you and 200 skeletal figures answer roll call. There are fewer of you than yesterday. A handful simply never stood for the count. Each missing face is a nameless casualty, already melted into the icy expanse. You steel your heart against recognition. Today's orders: a forced march across 15 brutal miles of tundra to build a rail line connecting 2 forward camps. No rest stops, no mercy. At 6 a.m., you set off through snow that reaches past your knees. The sky is a pale bruise above, promising another day of colorless nothingness. You clutch your satchel of nail splices and steel spikes against your chest, the only tools you'll need for hours. The first mile feels endless, your feet dragging as if tethered by chains. Behind you, you hear ragged gasps and the heavy thud of collapsing bodies. The guards churn the column forward with yells and rifle butts. You stumble over a frozen corpse, another victim of the march, and barely manage to step over without tripping. By 8 a.m., the line halts. Before you stretches the half-constructed rail bed, wooden ties laid in a haphazard row, rails nowhere to be seen. Your squad is ordered to drive spikes into each tie, securing them with hammer blows so brutal they jar your very soul. You take a spike and tap it twice, then raise your hammer high, only to be shouted at for inefficiency. You quicken your pace, tap, tap, hammer crash, spike bends. You wrench it out, spit curses into the air, and start again. Your fists blister beneath your gloves. Each blow sends a shockwave up your arm. Still, the guard's stopwatch ticks loudly in his mind, and he hurls insults like frozen shrapnel. At 10 a.m., a break, if you can call it that, water ration. You line up at a makeshift trough, ice-coated barrel spigots cracked by the cold, and gulp half-frozen water that tastes of metal and rot. You jostle with another prisoner and drop your tin cup into the barrel. The icy liquid engulfs it, and you watch helplessly as the cup sinks. The guard laughs, and you're lucky not to spend an hour digging through the sludge. Instead, you collect what dribbles down the barrel's spigot and press on. By noon, your cheeks are raw from windburn. A sharp-eyed overseer inspects your handiwork. Dozens of ties secured but misaligned by a millimeter. He fists your shirt, drags you forward, and makes you redo an entire row, just to remind you that precision matters more than survival. You grind your teeth, press the frozen spike deeper into rotting pine, and whisper a vow that you'll outlast his lifespan. At 1 p.m., lunch arrives, a half-formed dumpling of rancid lard and blackened dough, followed by a small pour of scalding broth. You bite into the dumpling, and half the filling oozes out in a greasy pool. You half chew, half swallow, aware that chewing too slowly invites the guard's wrath. You wash it down with broth that scalds your throat but warms your belly, briefly, before the cold rush returns. The afternoon drags on like a twisted eternity. Spike after spike, tie after tie, the rail bed inching forward at a pace that ensures you'll freeze where you stand long before completion. The wind picks up, driving snow into your eyes and plastering it to your lashes. You blink through a white blur, unsure if you're weeping or if the flakes simply refuse to melt. By 4 p.m., you're too spent to hold the hammer. Your arms hang limply. Each breath is a labor. You raise your head and see the guard watching you with cold satisfaction. He nods. Time to switch roles. Instead of spiking, you're sent with 5 others to fetch more ties. New logs waiting beyond a ridge half a mile away. You trudge toward them in single file. Snow whistles between the trees. When you arrive, you find the logs piled high and frost-crusted. Each weighs at least 50 pounds. You and your partners hoist one end, stagger under the weight, and begin the trek back. The path is treacherous. Hidden ice, wind-blown drifts, and the specter of collapse. Mid-stride, your partner's boot slips, and the log nearly flattens him like a pancake. You yank it free, heart hammering, then curse yourself for slowing down the line. At 5:30 p.m., you finally return to the spike hammering detail. The sky leaks gray as dusk approaches. The guard orders you to work by torchlight. You manage a few more spikes in the flickering glow before your hammer hand gives out entirely. You collapse onto your haunches, watching the lantern's flame flicker. The guard strides over and with a single push of his boot, sends you face first into the ice. You skid forward and come to rest with a crack in your cheekbone. You taste blood, warm and insistent. You push yourself upright as best you can. Your face stings with both the cut and the realization that if you refuse to work now, you'll die in the snow. Night settles like a tombstone. You're herded back to camp on unsteady legs, face bleeding into your collar. The medic's hut beckons. You wince as he peels tape from your cheek, presses iodine into the laceration that burns like acid, and bandages it with trembling hands. You nod your thanks, though your voice cracks into a rasp. Sleep, he murmurs, if you can. You step into the barracks where bodies lie piled on straw, scoff at the few living amidst the dead, and claim the narrowest patch of floor. Your belly grumbles. Supper is a scant ladle of porridge with one dice-sized lump of turnip. You swallow it dry. As you lie on your back, gazing at the slats of the ceiling, and the one dim bulb swinging overhead, you realize it's been days since you felt truly dry, truly warm, or truly alive. Yet a spark remains in your chest, a rebellion against surrender, a flicker of that old stubborn desire to see daylight again. Before you drift into fitful slumber, you think of your family, of stories of home told around a hearth, of the promise that sunlight brings. Here, sunlight is a lie, a promise broken by the blade of a guard's watch and the bite of a freezing gale. But for tonight, you hold that lie close, letting it cradle your last vestiges of hope until the bugle wrenches you awake at 5 a.m. once more, and the cycle of cruelty begins again. Imagine being chained in a dank hold below deck, the swell rocking the ship so violently that your skull feels like a gong, while the stench of human waste and rotting fish assaults your nostrils. Every breath tastes like salted misery, and you realize there's nowhere to run, because you're not even allowed to stand. Welcome aboard the 15th century slave ship, where the only thing more crushing than the hull above you is the weight of despair in every heartbeat. Below deck, time stretches into a grotesque eternity. In the next chapter of our journey into historical absurdity and true human suffering, we'll explore why your mind would crack before you even glimpsed land. When you're first herded down the narrow, sloping gangway, the sun's glare vanishes like a cruel promise. You stumble into half-light, sound muffled by thick planks overhead. The slam of the hatch lid is like a tomb being sealed. You find yourself in a cramped hold, perhaps 20 feet long but mashed with 30 people, each shackled ankle to ankle. Your spine curves unnaturally to accommodate the low overhead beams. At best, you can only stoop. You share space with strangers, men too weak to talk, women clutching infants who whimper against the clinking chains, and children whose eyes are already grim with terror. There is no room to sit, so you'll lean against a fellow prisoner, exchanging a fleeting look of horror, because the first lesson here is that privacy is a luxury you no longer possess. If you manage to find a precarious balance, you soon notice the walls are dripping water. Salt spray from the deck above trickles through every crack, coating you in dampness. Your cloth tunic adheres to your skin, turning clammy and cold. The air is thick with moisture, and soon enough the temperature drops as night falls. There's no blanket, no pillow, only the cold wood beneath you and the bodies pressed in on all sides. Breathing becomes a tactical exercise. Inhale, exhale, just enough to stay alive but not enough to draw attention from the guard above, who paces the deck with a lantern, his shadow cutting across the flimsy wooden hatch. If you breathe too loudly, you risk a rifle butt through the port, or worse, being tossed overboard as a troublemaker. But the physical discomfort is only the beginning. Soon the stench of human excrement rivals any torture chamber in its intensity. The ship has no latrine below deck. Men and women use broken pottery shards or slivered wood planks to relieve themselves where they stand. Urine pools at your feet. Diarrhea streaks the beams. The air stinks of ammonia and sickness. You gag, retch, swallow bile, and then realize you can't afford to vomit, because if you do, you'll choke on your own fluids or drown in someone else's. So you grit your teeth, swallow twice, and pray your stomach holds together until you make it back above deck, where the fresh air is only half hopeful, since the deck itself reeks of brine and tar. Food and water are equally barbaric in their insufficiency. Once a day, if you're lucky, you receive a small tin cup of brackish water drawn from barrels that the crew has cleaned by filtering through torn sails. It's nothing more than stale rainwater, mixed with splinters of wood and the occasional dead insect. You sip it greedily. 15 minutes later, you're desperately thirsty again. Solid food consists of a hunk of hard biscuit, as thick as a brick and twice as dry, scraped from a communal crate. You bite into it and feel tiny shards grating your gums. You chew mechanically, aware that chewing too loudly might earn a blow to the head. Still, your teeth are scraping, grinding, cracking, until finally you swallow the powdery remains, only to regret it as your stomach rebels. Many prisoners simply gnaw the biscuit, sigh, and spit it back into the collective trough, preferring auditory despair over physical agony. With each wave, the ship pitches and rolls. Whether you're chained to the port or starboard side, you can't stabilize yourself. Your body slams against fellow captives. Any attempt to brace yourself only shifts strain elsewhere. Your shoulders jam, your hips ache, your spine protests. After hours of this, every movement feels like a fresh bruise. Your limbs go numb. You test the chain's slack, just enough to allow a glimmer of movement, but not enough to break free. You try to relieve the pins and needles in your foot, but find that shifting your weight simply causes more friction, burns against the wooden deck. You wonder if the crew above ever feels the guilt of your agony, and you realize guilt isn't part of their moral compass, profit is. Day bleeds into night without relief. The hold is pitch black, lit only by shafts of moonlight filtering through the hatch cracks, or the occasional lantern flickering above. You count the seconds by the rhythm of your heart, beat, 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 until you lose track entirely. Sleep is an elusive luxury. If you close your eyes, you risk toppling into a mass of bodies, limbs tangling until someone screams. A lullaby of coughs and moans fills the cramped air. Some prisoners sleep upright, heads bowed. Others lean against the hull, eyes open, staring into the endless dark. Your mind starts to warp. Without a view of the sky, you lose your sense of time. You forget how long you've been down here. The concept of tomorrow becomes meaningless. It's simply another period of suffering. You drift in and out of awareness, sometimes dreaming of home, of fields or hearths, but those visions vanish as soon as you reach for them. Instead, you're jolted awake by the slap of a guard's boot on the hatch, signaling your daily inspection. You fumble up, jostle other prisoners, and stand as best you can. A lantern swings in, revealing hundreds of wide, hollow eyes staring back. The captain counts you off, and you realize they've lost a few names since yesterday. You don't want to be next. The next indignity is aboard. After days, or is it weeks, in the hold, the hatch creaks open to admit blinding light and frigid wind. You emerge onto the main deck, blinking as if you've crawled from the grave. The crew ties you to belaying pins. A slight improvement over the chains, but the noose cuts into your wrists. Above you, the horizon is an unbroken line of sea and sky. You inhale deeply, hoping for fresh air, but are greeted with gale-force winds that sting your face and strip tears unceremoniously. The ship's deck is slick with algae and vomit. The crew tosses handfuls of stale fish into the trough at your feet, telling you to eat. You cringe at the thought. The fish are half decomposed, eyes milky, flesh sliding off bones. Yet you're starving. You lean forward, swallow a single piece, and nearly choke on its gristle. It's survival over dignity now. As the ship cleaves through the ocean, you're expected to work. Under the overseer's lash, you help hoist sails or bale water, always under watchful eyes. The wind rips at your torn garments, and the whip tears into flesh. Every movement is excruciating, but refusal means being thrown overboard. You imagine the abyss below, sharks circling, waiting for an ill-fated swimmer. The thought of jumping to death is tempting until you remember your family, the possibility of freedom, and the cruelty of unfinished stories. Night on deck is no respite. The cold seeps deeper into your bones, and you shiver uncontrollably. The crew locks the gunnels, rattling chains to ensure you stay put. You huddle against the railing, watching dark waves crash against the ship's side, hoping for a lull. The ocean's roar is relentless. Sleep comes in broken fits, 10 seconds at a time, because every stray wave sends a chill down your spine. You dream of drowning, only to snap awake when your blanket of sea foam threatens to sweep you overboard. Meanwhile, the constant rocking of the vessel and the sensory deprivation below decks begin to crack the mind. You catch yourself talking to imaginary friends in the dark hold, clutching an empty corner of the deck as though it's a loved one. You whisper nonsense incantations to stay sane, repeating prayers you no longer believe. Sometimes you laugh without cause, startling fellow prisoners. Other times you break down into inconsolable sobs, tears frozen on your cheeks. The line between waking and sleeping, truth and hallucination, start to blur. When the ship finally reaches land, if it ever does, it's as if you'd stepped off the world's edge. Your bones ache, your skin is mottled with sores, your eyes are sunken. You're alive, yes, but are you really the same person who climbed aboard weeks ago? The taste of freedom is bittersweet, for no mind emerges unscathed from this floating inferno. In the next part of our journey, we'll delve deeper into the horrors of the deck. The brutal punishments, the fever-ridden screams, and the moment when the human psyche truly snaps. But for now, cling to the memory of air you once took for granted, because below deck, every breath is borrowed time, and every heartbeat a ticking countdown to madness. When dawn cracks the sky above the rolling ocean, you're still clinging to the railing, rocking with the ship's roll, as though you've become part of its tortured timbers. The gulls wheel overhead, mocking you with their freedom, their shrill cries cutting through the wind like a blade. You force yourself upright, ankles stiff from the leg chains they've left on you, and stumble toward the foredeck. Here begins your daily ritual of humiliation and endurance, one that will test your flesh, your spirit, and your very grip on reality. First come the cleaning. The bosun's mate bellows for you to approach the ship's hull, where he cripples your wrists with a length of rope and forces you to kneel. "Sweep," he snarled, doling you a rag dipped in brine. You scrub barnacles and sea slime from the wood until your knuckles bleed, tears burned by the acid sting of salt. The other prisoners circle, each assigned a segment, each fighting the urge to collapse. Above you, the crew lounges on coils of rope, sipping watered wine and laughing at your pain. They know you're expendable, an asset to be cleaned and used, not a person. By mid-morning, the deck has become an arena of cruelty. The captain's favorite pastime is inspection, during which he strides along the deck rail and pokes at every prisoner with the butt of his cutlass. If he finds a speck of dirt, a stray hair, or a single grain of grit on your tunic, he jabs you. The steel edge bites into flesh and bone, drawing warm lines of protest. "Neatness, you maggot!" he roars. You flinch, roll to the next target, and snap your back straight. You dare not show pain, nor pity. If you cry out, they install you in leg irons and toss you below deck without water or biscuit for 24 hours. Next is the catwalk, a plank dangling over the starboard side, anchored by thick ropes. The captain likes to test balance under duress. You're led, one by one, to the beam. Shackled by one wrist to the mast, you must traverse the plank while the deck rocks and the wind shrieks. Failure to make it all the way draws a whip across your back, and if the captain's in a malicious mood, a dunk in the ocean for marine baptism. You swallow your fear and lower your gaze to the plank, feeling each splinter creep into your soul. You step forward, hand along the mast, wind tearing your breath away, and count each inch until you reach the end. You force a curt nod, and the guard unties you. The next prisoner shivers his way across, spitting out curses of salt and fear. As the sun climbs, the unbearable heat sets in. The deck, blackened by tar and sun, radiates heat that sears the bottom of your feet. You yank off your sandals, but the blistering boards create fresh lacerations on the soles. To keep the deck from burning your blood, you and your fellow captives are ordered to pour buckets of seawater over it, but then are forbidden to drink for a full hour afterward, lest you steal freshwater privileges. You rinse your feet only to have the salt water exacerbate your burns. You bite your lip to keep the howl down and hobble back to your station. Then comes unload and reload. The ship carries trade goods, barrels of pepper, chests of embroidered silk, bales of cotton, and every barrel must be hoisted off the vessel at each port. You're lashed into a human chain to pass heavy crates from deck to dock and back again during unloading errors. If even one crate slips, they punish the last man, you. The guard positions you beneath the crate and gives a signal. You feel the weight settle above your head, pressing on your skull, your shoulders, your chest. You fight the instinct to gasp for air, to scream, to crumble. Then the signal comes and the crate lifts, only enough to crush you the next moment. "Lucky!" The guard snarls, kicking you aside. You crawl back, eyes seeing stars, and resume the chain. By mid-afternoon, a thick red smear creeps across your tunic from a cut on your hip. You press your hand to it, tasting iron on your tongue. You realize they've never offered you a bandage. Wounds must stay raw, a souvenir of your captivity. Infection takes hold swiftly in salt air. Flesh swells, the gangrene sets in. You watch as one of the younger captives, barely a man, writhes on the deck, flesh oozing black fluid. The ship's surgeon, a drunken barber surgeon, tosses him scraps of vinegar and mutters, "No cure for laziness." The boy howls, and at day's end they heave him overboard. You hear the splash and the gargled cough as he sinks, a sick lullaby underscoring the ocean's indifference. Night brings no rest. The deck empties, the hatches lock, and you retreat to the rat-infested hold, but not before the guards blindfold half the prisoners for night games. You're forced to stumble around the deck, guided by the slaps on your back from whips. The captain laughs as you collide with barrels, stagger into one another, mouths smeared with salt and fear. They call it blind revelry. You call it madness. Below deck, the stench is thick enough to choke on. Rats the size of your fist skitter over your body, nibbling at toes and ribs. You curl into a kneeling position, chains clinking, waiting for morning. But sleep is a stranger. You replay the day's torments, the whip, the plank, the crates, the boy's scream. In the darkness, you whisper prayers to gods you never believed in, begging for madness or death, whichever comes first. At uncountable hours, the captain orders water for the hold. A bucket slide echoes down the beam, a brief chance at wetting your parched throat. The guard hurls you the tin cup and you dive for it, gulping the rancid liquid until your stomach revolts. You convulse, retching into the corner. Another prisoner tries to help, only to be slapped into silence. You lie there, chest heaving, bile registering as a bitter new flavor of captivity. When the hatch finally creaks open again, it's like the gates of hell swinging ajar. You emerge blinking, sunlight stabbing your eyes. For a moment, you think you might collapse face first on the deck. But the ocean wind whips through your hair, loosens your limbs, and you feel the stirrings of something you thought impossible. Hope. The horizon beckons, a promise of land, of freedom, or at least of something different. But the captain has other plans. He orders you to the rigging, climb up the ratline and mend the sails. Your legs shake beneath you, muscles wasted by starvation. You haul yourself skyward, soothed by the thought you might fall and end your nightmare. But you cling on, and when you reach the sails, the canvas tears under your hands, whipping like a living thing in the gale. You wrestle the patched linen, knotting lines until your fingertips are raw. Below you, the ocean yawns. You look down and wonder if the fall would be swift, or if the ropes would catch you and tangle you in knots until the ship plowed on without you. When you finally descend, the captain strides over, grin splitting his face. "Well climbed, monkey," he says, slapping you so hard the wind is knocked from your lungs. "You'll live yet, but barely." Then he moves on, leaving you gasping, knees buckling, to rejoin the human chain. As dusk bleeds into night, you're herded back below deck for the umpteenth time. There you lie on the cold wood with your brothers and sisters in chains. Some moan softly, others have gone silent, gone mad, or perhaps dead. In the cramped gloom, time dissolves again. You drift between half dream and half hallucination, your mind splintering. You hear distant drums, war drums, and see flickers of fire. But when you open your eyes, it's only your own blood reflected in the water on the deck above. The next sunrise will bring more horrors. The day when madness finally claims you, or the day when land falls into view and the true voyage of your life begins. But for now, you remain tethered to the ship's underbelly, an unwanted soul in a voyage of human misery, inching ever closer to the brink of madness. Below deck, the air grows foul enough to choke a horse, a putrid cocktail of sweat, vomit, excrement, and rot. You awaken to the scratch of rats scurrying across the planks, their beady eyes reflecting the dim lantern light that filters through the hatch above. It's your third day in this floating oubliette, and already your mind teeters on the edge of collapse. Morning begins, not with a bugle, but with a low, agonized moan from one of the captives. You roll to see the youth who shared your corner, the one whose voice cracked on day 2's roll call. Wrestling with a bout of fever, his skin glows hot against the chilled wood. The barber surgeon, reeking of spirits stronger than his medicines, comes to examine him. He pokes the youth's arm with a rusted awl, then swabs the wound with rancid vinegar, muttering curses about dead weight. The youth's scream echoes through the hold. You close your eyes, willing yourself to be deaf, but the sound burrows into your brain. When it finally ends, you open your eyes to see him shivering violently, delirious. He whispers about home, about his mother's soup, and then lapses into an eerie silence. You have no such luxury as a fever. Your illness is a slow erosion of sanity. The chains around your ankles clank as you stagger into the next chamber of torment. The exercise deck. It's a narrow space just above the hold, where the crew forces you to march in place for an hour, regardless of sea state. Above you, rigging sways, rain drips through the cracks, and the wind screams around the hull. You pick up your feet mechanically, wrists aching from the ropes that bite into your skin. There is no rhythm to this drill, no corporal's whistle, no measured beat, just the unpredictable roll of the ship, the crack of a whip when someone falters, and the unsteady lantern glow that casts dancing shadows across so many hollow faces. After what feels like an eternity, the overseer declares, "Enough," and the doors slam behind you. You stumble outside into the fresh air, gulping it like a man lost in the desert. Above deck, the crew is unloading fresh water barrels from the hold via a block and tackle system. You're next to join the line, hauling heavy ropes that threaten to sever your hands if you slip. You grip the rope with gloves so thin they might as well be your bare skin. Each pull tightens the barrel's weight, yanks your feet from under you, and jolts your shoulders. Sweat beads at your temples despite the chill, and runs into your eyes, stinging like hot sand. You blink it away, swallow a curse, and pull again. The barrel inches skyward and, snap, the rope frays at the splice and sings through your palms. You howl, dropping the rope, and clutch your bleeding hands to your chest. The guard prods you with his boot. "Move!" he snarls. You bite back tears, muster every scrap of strength, and finish the lift. Midday brings the hygiene inspection, one more absurd theater of cruelty. The captain strides above the hatches, bending to inspect each face. You're lined up in a narrow gangway between barrels of pitch and sacks of pepper. He thrusts a finger under your chin, forcing your head back. "No lice?" he sneers. Then he jerks your hair to one side. You feel dozens of tiny insects scatter like tumbleweeds, disappearing into your collar. He frowns, narrows his eyes, and whispers to the surgeon. Before you can plead, you're dragged into the surgeon's alcove. He shaves a square patch of scalp, scrapes out eggs with his dull blade, and slaps a caustic ointment into the wound. The searing pain steals your breath. You collapse against a barrel, gasping, while he moves on to the next prisoner as if nothing happened. When the inspection ends, you look at your reflection in a puddle of oil on the deck, half machine, half wretch, eyes sunken and wild. The afternoon sun mercifully hides behind clouds, but the cold remains. Below deck, the dampness seeps into your very marrow. You lie on the same plank you've known since embarkation, body curled into a fetal position to preserve heat. You try to sleep, but every moan, every cough, every scurry of rats keeps you on edge. In the relentless darkness, your thoughts become your only company, relentless, invasive, and cruel. You replay old memories, the scent of bread baking, children's laughter, the feel of soft grass beneath your feet. Those memories now feel like distant fever dreams, flickering and ephemeral. You awake to a different horror, the smell of burning. Above the hatch, the crew is torched wood to repel vermin, or so they claim. The flames scorch the planks and melt the crude pitch sealing the seams. Drops of molten tar plop onto the heads of the prisoners below. You duck, catch a glint of orange in your peripheral vision, and feel a drop of molten pitch land on your shoulder. It sticks like glue, searing your skin. You scream, flail at the hole in the floorboards, and lash out until a guard's boot connects with your side, knocking the wind out of you. You collapse, burning pitch melting into your tunic, and scream again until your throat goes raw. In between these torments, the ship endures storms that feel like the wrath of the gods. Rain hammers the deck, lightning illuminates the sky, and thunder shudders through every timber. The rolling deck hurls you against the bulkhead. Chains wrap around your legs, yanking and twisting until bones protest. You pray for death, but are answered only by the captain's order to secure the cargo. Roll up the hammocks, tighten the tarps, fetch more ropes. You obey, soaked to the bone, numb with cold, but too frightened of the lash to pause. Mid-storm, the captain's laughter rings out, a sound more chilling than any thunderclap. Occasionally, a ray of absurdity breaks through. A drunken sailor will hurl a live chicken into the hold, mocking the prisoners by letting it flap among them, before dispatching it with a hatchet and tossing the bleeding carcass down as food. You watch the bird's wings beat for a split second, gasp for breath, and then recognize the moment as a metaphor for your own struggle. The crew laughs, the prisoner eyes the raw flesh, considers eating it warm and slick, and then collapses in shame. You stare at the dripping meat, torn between hunger and revulsion. By the third night of this third day, your mind is a fractured mirror. You whisper to imagined allies, "Steady now, keep your head," even though there is no one to hear you but rats and yourself. You hear music in the creak of the hull, voices chanting from the hold's shadows. In one delirious trance, you believe the deck has turned to ice and that you're walking on glass, cracking it with every step. You feel the shards slicing into your feet, splinters of memory piercing your muddled consciousness. Then suddenly, the hatch flies open. A blast of starlight slices into the hold, and a fresh breeze of salt air rushes in. You blink against the brightness, seesaw between relief and suspicion. A voice, unexpectedly gentle, calls your name. You stagger upward, clutching the edges of the hatch, and emerge blinking at the deck above. The captain stands by the rail, looking pale and serious. "Land ho," he announces. "Prepare to disembark." The words feel unreal. After so many days of bondage, brutality, and delirium, the promise of land seems both miracle and curse. You stare at the horizon, where a thin line of dark green flecks against the sky. A distant shore. Joy wells in your chest, mingled with dread. You have no idea what awaits on that land. Freedom, enslavement on a different shore. or simply another form of torment. As the ship slows and lowers its boats, you clutch your chains and steel yourself for the final ordeal, stepping from one prison onto another. Your mind, splintered but still clinging to life, resolves to keep fighting. Even as madness whispers that all is lost, you will step onto that sand, bleed if necessary, and claw your way toward whatever lies beyond. Because at this point, to truly surrender your mind would be to die twice, once below deck, once above, and you've survived this far by sheer stubbornness. As the lifeboat swings down, you take a ragged breath, lean forward past the railing, and step into the unknown. The longboat's oars splash rhythmically as you're ferried toward the shore, each stroke a drumbeat of dread and expectation. Your wrists still chafe where the rusty manacles bit into flesh, chains rattling with every heave of the oar. Above, the ship's hull looms like a cruel mother refusing to let go, while ahead the coastline shimmers uncertainly, fringed by mangroves and tangled palms. This is the moment you've both yearned for and feared. After weeks, or was it months, of torment at sea, you will at last touch land, but the nightmare is far from over. As the longboat scrapes against a mudbank, a guard shouts, "Disembark!" and you clamber over bodies, one misstep sending you knee first into brackish silt. You taste the grime, earth, salt, sweat, and fight the urge to retch. The guard yanks you upright by your collar and herds you toward a cluster of makeshift pens built from rotting timber. Other survivors, once fellow captives, now gaunt shadows, shuffle past, eyes vacant, spirits hollowed. Some collapse before they even reach the enclosure, and are dragged away by dogs or left to the mercy of vultures that already circle overhead. Inside the yard, you're forced to strip to your waist. The sun burns your raw shoulders as you shed the sea-soaked remnants of your tunic, revealing wounds crusted with salt and pus. A pair of overseers examine you like livestock at market. They prod your ribs, lift your arms, and sniff your breath for signs of disease. When the elder overseer snorts in disgust and jabs a finger at your midriff, where a festering ulcer glows red beneath scab, he whistles sharply. Two men seize you, drag you aside, and strip your leg chain free, tossing it into a heap for reconditioning. You wince as the heavy loop falls away, but the reprieve is brief. They cuff your wrists behind your back and clip you to a rickety post. "Wait for your turn," the overseer sneers before stalking off. You slump to the scorched earth, wrists chafing, back straining against the post. Sweat drips into your eyes as the tropical air hangs heavy with humidity, the scent of rotting vegetation, and the low moans of the newly arrived. At last, a clerk appears with a stylus and a battered ledger. He calls your name, grinds out a number, and jots it in soot-stained lines. Your new identity as cargo in this foreign land. No name, no worth, only a tally. After your number, dozens more follow, each a face disappearing into columns of ink, futures wiped clean. When your turn ends, a tall, skeletal man in a threadbare coat escorts you to the next station, branding. He carries a flat iron heated in the forge's embers, its surface glowing a dull orange. You remember the screams of chickens and goats, the smell of charred hide. Now it's your turn. You're forced onto your knees. The overseer pins your wrist against a block. The iron hisses as it makes contact, burning through skin and sinew, imprinting a grotesque mark that spells your status, SV, slave, vendor's property. You grit your teeth, stifle the howl, and taste ash on your tongue. The man drips aqua vitae into the wound, and you glimpse your own widened eyes reflected in the oily liquid. When he finishes, he twists your arm upright and shoves you toward a line of traders and planters who critique your physique, your age, your teeth. You stand naked before them, evaluated like livestock for strength and productivity. At midday, you're herded into a low, open-sided shed where you and others receive your rations, a bowl of weedy gruel thick with bits of iguana skin and a small cup of thin corn beer. You swallow mechanically, aware that the overseer's gaze follows every bite. You share the trough with men flexed by years of harsh labor and women whose bodies have already bent to the cane fields. They eat in grim silence, occasional curses or murmurs the only sounds. The wind stirs dust across the ground, and you realize today begins a new chapter of suffering under the blazing sun. After the meager meal, you are marched out to the sugarcane fields, endless green stalks swaying like a living prison. The foreman hands you a cutlass, its blade dull, its handle splintered. You try to heft it, but your wrist still throbs from the branding. You watch as seasoned enslaved laborers, men whose torsos gleam with sweat and muscle, slice through the cane with astonishing speed. You swing at a stalk and your blade sticks. You jerk it free, send fibrous shards into your neck. The foreman roars, "Faster, boy!" and cracks his lash. The cutlass sings steel against plant, but you only manage half the yield of your neighbors. Each strike sends a jolt through your shoulder. Each lump of sugar sap that dribbles down your arm burns like acid. By mid-afternoon, under the unforgiving sun, your shirtless back is tattooed with scorching beams. The smell of sweat, cane sap, and dust forms a suffocating haze. Your lungs burn on each breath as you bend to cut, lift bundles heavier than yourself, sling them onto ragged mules that wobble beneath the load. When you stumble, the whip cracks, a thin line of fire across your calf. You stagger forward, tears of sweat and pain mingling on your cheeks, until you fall to your knees in a sprawl of green stalks. Around you, the rhythm of labor becomes a brutal anthem. The cutlasses swish, the mules grunt, the chatter of overseers, the crack of lash, the moan pleas for water. Any sign of hesitation draws condemnation. Lazy bastard, work or die. The threat is real. Exhausted bodies sometimes collapse and never rise again. The vultures feast and the work continues. As shadows lengthen, you're herded back toward the pens, hands cuffed, bodies weary. The overseer counts each column as it passes. 95, 96, 97. Your number doesn't match the ledger. A man 2 places ahead has been carried off, dead or beyond saving. You swallow the fear that tomorrow you might be missing too. Back in the yard, you're stripped again, hosed off with brackish water, and handed a thin garment of rough weave. You stand bare to the waist as an overseer pries at the festering wound on your hip, now stained black and oozing. He mutters, "Leech him here." A waif-like boy approaches, dirt-caked hands clutching leeches in a jar of vinegar. You grit your teeth as the slimy creatures attach, burrowing for nourishment. The boy's smile is empty. He's done this 1,000 times. You clutch the post, sweat and pus dripping onto your bare feet. The overseer walks away, flicking his lash against passing bodies. Night brings no shelter. You're herded under a crude canopy of palm fronds lashed to poles, barely shielding from rain and insects. You lie on the dirt floor, back pressed against the post that still bears your chains, ankles cuffed so your legs cannot stretch. Crickets chirp and rodents scurry. Each footstep snaps a twig in the undergrowth. The scent of sugar fermenting in vats drifts on the breeze, mingling with the pungent stink of sweat and rot. You close your eyes, but sleep is a distant memory. Instead, you drift into fevered dreams. The ship's hold, the branding iron, the lash, all fusing into one ceaseless torment. In the pre-dawn gloom, an alarm bell tolls. Up! You crawl to your feet, heavy as lead, one bootless foot dragging. The overseer's silhouette looms, whip coiled at his side. "Move!" he roars. You clutch at the post for balance, then stagger into the queue that will lead you once more into the boiling fields. Over the following days, your body stiffens like old wood. The ulcer weeps into your clothing. Maggots find their way in, burrowing under the scabs. You groan on the cutting floor when a shard of flint jagged enough catches your palm, a festering gift from a cask you rolled too quickly. The midwife who tends your wound is no healer, only another enslaved woman whose own daughter has died of fever. She wraps the injury in a tea-soaked cloth and whispers prayers in a tongue you almost recognize as the one you left behind. Your mind fractures under the unrelenting cadence of abuse. You catch yourself praying to gods you never believed in, bargaining with saints you never knew. You sing hymns you only heard snippets of on Sunday mornings before your capture, songs you can't even remember the melody of. You argue with yourself. Is freedom of mind possible when the cage is your world? You pluck strands of hair until your scalp bleeds, whispering to the cotton leaves, "Remember who you are." One afternoon, as you limp toward the fields, you glimpse a white rider on a horseback approaching the sugar mill. His fine coat and gleaming boots shine in the sun. He surveys the rows of laborers like they were insects, then dismounts and strolls through the canes, trailing a scent of cologne and authority. When he stops before you, you expect permission to rest, or perhaps a death sentence. Instead, he holds out a hand with a small leather pouch. Inside, a silver coin and a handful of coarse tobacco leaves. "Smoking's a privilege," he says with a cruel smirk. "You earn it by making quota." You pocket the leaves, flame swirling in your chest, hope and rage mingling like fire and dry grass. That night, you smuggle a single leaf into your mouth, bite down, and feel the sharp sting of nicotine as it scorches your throat. You cough until your eyes water, but revel in the burn. You lie under the stars, if you can call them that, behind the canopy of palms, and feel for a moment like a man again, remembering sensation beyond pain. But in the darkness, memories twist. You see the hull's planks, the branding irons glow, the cutlasses swing. The tobacco sweetness turns to ash on your tongue, and you vow to survive. Weeks blur into months. Your hands bear scars, knife cuts, brine burns, whip lashes, maggot tracks. Your ribs jut beneath sunken flesh. Your feet are a map of blisters and cracks. Yet each dawn you rise, you march, you cut, you bleed. Survivors around you fall in lines. 100, 90, 80, until only the strongest remain. The overseers shout, the dogs bark, the wind moans through the cane. Life is a measure of pain. Can you push your arms another inch? Can you lift one more bundle? Can you swallow the gruel and live? One day, a thunderstorm unleashes its fury. Torrential rain so heavy it flattens the cane, washes out the paths, and turns the fields to a quagmire. The foreman orders you to keep cutting, rain be damned. You try, but your cutlass flies from your hand, gashes your leg, and you fall face first into the mud. A dog sinks its teeth into your shoulder. You writhe, scream incoherently, until the overseer stands over you with his whip. But the wrath of nature, a fallen branch, a flash flood, shelters you. The overseer retreats, shouts ring out to secure refuge, and the captives scramble for cover under the ramshackle shed. You lie in a puddle, bone cold, fever hot, delirious, and for a moment the world vanishes. You see no overseers, no traders, no fields, only endless rains flooding your mind. You lose count of time as your consciousness drifts. When the storm subsides, the dead are counted. Bodies washed into the swamp, limbs snapped by the wind, pneumonia already claiming others. The trader on horseback returns, eyes narrowed. He motions to one battered man. He's mine. That man, once full of revolt, now hollow, staggers to his feet and is branded again, this time with the iron hot enough to sear bone. The rest of you watch in numb horror. You wonder if you'll be next. Yet grudgingly, the fire of life persists. You rise once more, find your chains still gone, your wounds still oozing, your spirit still flickering. You march back to the fields, cut another bundle of cane, and taste the sap on your lips. It's sweetness born of blood and tears, but it's taste of living at last. One dawn, months after first stepping onto that mud bank, you hear drum beats echoing from the village beyond the fields, celebrations of the harvest, gaudy banners and foreign music. A company of soldiers arrives, uniforms crisp, muskets gleaming. They ride among you and call names, you and the handful of other living captives. They've come from the distant capital, issuing a decree. Emancipation of a certain group or trade for prisoners of war. You're free. The word echoes in your ears, unbelievable as a child's bedtime story. You fall to your knees, the cane underfoot like shards of glass, tears free falling. The soldiers unlock your shackles, lift you to your feet, and hand you a blanket. You wrap it around your trembling shoulders, warmth seeping into your bones like the first promise of dawn. But freedom is a double-edged sword. Your mind is a labyrinth of horrors. The ship's hold, the branding iron, the whips, the fevers, the cutlass's edge, the storm's rage. The cane fields stand as silent sentinels to your bloodied history. You swallow the taste of cane sap, smoke your final tobacco leaf with gratitude and mourning. You step toward the soldiers, toward the unknown world beyond the fields, and feel the weight of your story, the unspeakable agony, the stolen life, the flickering spark of survival. As you walk away from the sugarcane prison, you glance back at the waving green stalks. They sway in the breeze like specters, each rustle a reminder of the nightmare you endured. You lift your face to the sun, no longer scorching, but gentle, and close your eyes. You are free, yet forever changed. The world marches on, and you are free to chart your own course once more. But deep inside, a quiet question lingers. How much of yourself did you leave behind at sea, at the mill, at the mercy of iron and flame? The answer drifts on the wind, lost among the palm fronds and the echoes of a life you lived for someone else's profit. You take a breath, step forward, and surrender your chains at last. Chains no longer of iron, but of memory.